My wife cried in court with fake bruises and marks. A $600 per hour lawyer, and claims I hit her. She wanted my business, the kids, and $22,000 per month. The judge believed her, until I played the video of her applying the makeup. If hell had a waiting room, it would smell exactly like that courthouse. Old paper, bad coffee, and regret marinated in air conditioning. My name's Michael Rowan. I'm 43, co-founder of Rowan Freight, father of two, and, as of 9:13 a.m. that Tuesday, apparently the villain in a Lifetime movie. You ever watch one of those courtroom dramas where the husband's the bad guy? The violent one, the manipulative one, the guy who looks guilty even when he blinks? Yeah, that was me. Except I wasn't acting. I was just sitting there in a suit that felt 2 sizes too tight and wondering if this was what rock bottom smelled like. Rachel, my wife, or I guess ex-wife in training, sat 10 feet away in her Navy power suit, dabbing her eyes like she was trying to win an Oscar for most tragic victim in a fabricated drama. Her tears could have hydrated California. Every sniffle sounded rehearsed. And right beside her, Harper Dawes, her $600 an hour legal bulldog, sat with a folder so thick it could have stopped a bullet. The woman had a jawline sharp enough to slice deli meat and an expression that said, "I haven't laughed since the Bush administration." She stood, cleared her throat, and said the words that turned my morning into an emotional mugging. "Your Honor, this is a case of domestic violence." Now, I've heard gunshots before, once during a delivery route gone wrong in Newark, but nothing hits like that sentence did. My chest went cold. My hands went slick. The whole room shifted like gravity, suddenly got personal. I'm supposed to be the dad who grills on weekends and builds Lego sets on demand, not the guy people whisper about at PDA meetings. The jury leaned in like they were watching cable news live from the apocalypse. A reporter scribbled so fast her pen squeaked. Somewhere behind me, I swear someone gasped. Meanwhile, my attorney, Mason Colby, leaned over and whispered, "Breathe." Mason's one of those guys who dresses like an expensive threat, tailored gray suit, silk tie, hair so precise you'd think he uses a laser comb. He's calm in a way that makes you nervous. He mouthed again, "Calm." I nodded, even though my heart was trying to dance its way out of my ribcage. Harper went on, her voice smooth and venomous. "We have photographic evidence, Your Honor. Bruising, emotional trauma. We're seeking full custody and financial reparation." She opened her folder like she was presenting the Ark of the Covenant, and out came glossy color photos of Rachel's face, purple and yellow patches across her cheek. The jury collectively exhaled like a horror movie crowd. I wanted to scream, "It's fake." But Mason put a hand on my arm, the international lawyer's signal for don't blow your case before the coffee break. The judge, an older woman with reading glasses perched halfway down her nose, turned to me with that, "I've seen too many of your kind" look. I could practically feel her gavel warming up. And that's when Mason, bless his expensive soul, stood up. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit A." Now, if you've never been in court, let me paint the vibe. Silence so thick you can hear your own career crumbling, and the only thing breaking it is your heartbeat and the occasional cough from someone who forgot how to whisper. Mason walked over to the media cart. Yes, we brought a cart like it was show and tell day, and connected his laptop. The big courtroom screen flickered to life, and there she was, Rachel, my sweet, tearful, victimized wife. Except this version of her wasn't crying. She was calm, focused, sitting in front of her vanity, stippling foundation and purple eyeshadow onto her cheekbone with the precision of a makeup artist who missed her calling. You could hear the faint hum of her favorite podcast in the background, True Crime Queens. The irony was too poetic. She leaned in closer to the mirror, muttered something about needing more yellow to make it look real, and smiled at her reflection. The room went dead quiet. You could have heard an eyelash hit the floor. The judge's eyes narrowed, then widened. The bailiff's mouth fell open. Rachel's lawyer froze mid-breath, color draining from her face like someone had pulled the plug. Rachel's tears stopped instantly, like someone had hit the mute button on her performance. The jury's collective gasp was the kind of sound you usually only hear in stadiums or funerals. Mason let the footage play on loop, twice, because the universe deserved to enjoy that moment in HD. Then he turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, the defense rests, for now." I wanted to stand and slow clap. I wanted to high-five God, but instead, I sat there, still as stone, letting the silence chew on Rachel's lies. I watched her hand twitch toward her face, like she wanted to cover the evidence of her own fake evidence. Harper Dawes tried to recover, flipping through her papers as if she could somehow file away the humiliation. "Your Honor, this could be taken out of context," she managed to say. The judge tilted her head. "Ms. Dawes, context would require a second person in the room. Unless your client is both the abuser and the abused, I suggest you tread carefully." Boom. That was the sound of legal fireworks. The hearing wrapped faster than a TikTok dance. The judge adjourned pending further review, which is lawyer code for, "I need to recover from that plot twist." As people filed out, whispers followed me like paparazzi drones. "Did you see that video? He had proof. She made it up?" Every sentence was half disbelief, half gossip. The kind of stuff that becomes fuel for office small talk by lunchtime. Rachel stayed seated, staring straight ahead. Her eyes were dry now, sharp, almost calculating. The way someone looks when their perfect plan catches fire. I didn't say anything to her. Didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. I just grabbed my briefcase, nodded to Mason, and walked out. But inside, my emotions were doing parkour. Anger, relief, disbelief, all somersaulting together. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters. Cameras flashing, microphones waving like seaweed in a storm. "Mr. Rowan, is it true your wife faked her injuries? Do you have a statement? Are you suing her for defamation? Are you guilty of anything?" I wanted to answer, yes, guilty of marrying the wrong person, but Mason grabbed my arm before I could open my mouth. "Not today, Mike. Let it simmer." We ducked into his black sedan, and I finally exhaled. Mason loosened his tie. "That footage saved your ass," he said, matter of fact. "Where'd you even get it?" I smirked, still processing the chaos. "Long story involving a bad cat and a suspicious noise. You wouldn't believe me. Try me," he said. "Let's just say Rachel's not the only one who likes gadgets. I installed a hidden camera months ago because I thought we had a raccoon problem." Mason actually laughed. The dry, tired laugh of a man who's seen too many human disasters and finally found one worth drinking over. "Remind me to send your raccoon a thank you card." I leaned back against the seat and stared out the window at the courthouse disappearing behind us. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from friends, co-workers, even my sister. One said, "OMG, just saw you on TV. You're trending." Another said, "Proud of you, bro. Also, your wife's a psycho." Both accurate. I didn't reply. My mind was stuck replaying every moment of the hearing. The way Rachel looked when her lie collapsed, the way Harper's confidence cracked, the way the judge's face softened just a little when she looked at me afterward. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a monster. I felt human again. Mason dropped me at my office, or what was left of it. Rowan Freight. My name on the glass door looked like it was judging me. The reception desk was empty. The air smelled like coffee gone cold and fear of bad publicity. The staff had either taken the day off or were hiding behind HR-approved silence. I went straight to my office, shut the door, and finally let out the kind of laugh that comes from pure, unfiltered absurdity. Think about it. My wife fakes injuries, accuses me of abuse, cries in court, and then gets exposed by my own accidental surveillance footage. You can't make that up. Netflix would call it unrealistic. The laugh turned into something else, half hysteria, half exhaustion. When it stopped, I realized I wasn't happy. Not really. Vindicated, sure. Relieved, absolutely. But happy? No. Because I knew this wasn't over. Rachel wasn't the type to retreat quietly. She was the type who'd reload. I sat there, staring at the framed photo of our kids on my desk, Emma and Josh, ages 9 and 11. They had Rachel's eyes, my smile, and zero idea that their mom had just tried to turn their dad into a courtroom headline. That hurt the most. The idea that one day, they'd Google my name and find this circus. I closed my eyes and muttered, "God, if you're listening, maybe throw me a memo next time before my life turns into a legal thriller." The office door creaked open. It was Janet, my assistant, holding a cup of coffee. "You looked like you needed this," she said softly. I smiled, took it, and said, "If this has whiskey in it, you'll get a raise." She chuckled nervously. "Everyone's talking about what happened." "I bet they are," I said, sipping the coffee. "Tell them to wait for the sequel." I think it's called How to Survive a Marriage Explosion. When she left, I sat back and stared at the ceiling. The adrenaline was fading, and all that was left was fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones. I thought about Rachel again, about how good she'd been at pretending, how her tears had looked real even when her heart wasn't. And I realized something terrifying. I hadn't been married to a person. I'd been married to a performance. That night, when the evening news replayed the courtroom footage, I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching my life become primetime content. The anchor's voice was serious. New developments in the Rowan domestic case. Evidence suggests the allegations were fabricated. Then they cut to Rachel's photo, smiling like butter wouldn't melt. My phone buzzed again. "Mason, you did good today," he said. "Yeah," I replied, staring at the screen. "But good doesn't feel good yet." He paused. "Give it time. The truth always wins. It just takes the scenic route." I hung up, turned off the TV, and sat there in the dark, somewhere between anger and peace. The world had just watched my worst nightmare flip on its head, and all I could think was, how the hell did I end up here? That was the day my life got served. Not just legally, emotionally, spiritually, and yeah, with a side of tears. But here's the thing about being broken in public. It either destroys you or rewires you. I didn't know it yet, but that courtroom wasn't my downfall. It was my reboot. 3 months before the courtroom circus, my biggest problem in life was that Rachel kept using my beard trimmer to reshape her eyebrows. If you'd told me then that I'd soon be starring in my own legal drama, I would have laughed, poured another cup of coffee, and said something sarcastic about Netflix options. But here we are, living proof that life doesn't just hand out lemons. Sometimes it lobs them at your head like it's trying to knock sense into you. Back then, I was still under the illusion that Rachel and I were in what therapists call a rough patch. You know, the kind where you convince yourself that arguments, icy silences, and mutual eye-rolling are just the price of long-term love. We'd been married 12 years. 12 good years if you averaged the first 3 and ignored the last 5. Things had gotten tense. Not the fun kind of tension you fix with a weekend trip and champagne, but the kind that makes you Google how to tell if your spouse secretly hates you. It started small. Rachel stopped laughing at my jokes, which was tragic because I'm hilarious. She started sleeping with her phone under her pillow, a classic rookie move for anyone trying to be sneaky. Then came the whispers on late-night calls, the half-smiles at text notifications, and the emotional distance you could measure in light years. I told myself, she's just stressed. I mean, who isn't? Between her part-time charity work, my company, the kids, and our house that needed more repairs than a 90s Honda, stress was basically our third roommate. Then one Thursday night, I walked into the bedroom and caught her on the phone. Her tone was low, not romantic low, but scheming low, like she was negotiating a hostage release. I paused in the hallway because even though I'm not nosy by nature, marriage changes you. Suddenly you're fluent in analyzing sighs and decoding pauses. And then I heard it. The sentence that would stick in my brain like a bad jingle. "Once I get the children and half his company, we'll be set." At first, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she said half his company's time or half his mind. You know, something poetic and slightly unhinged. But nope. She said exactly what she meant, and she said it like someone planning a business expansion. The call ended with a soft laugh and a good night, Victor. I stood there, frozen, like an idiot holding a laundry basket full of regrets. I didn't even know a Victor. Well, not yet. Later, I'd find out he was a divorce attorney. One of those guys who probably practices smiling in the mirror to make sure it looks expensive. That night, I didn't confront her. Oh no, I went full stealth mode. You don't walk into the lion's den screaming boo. You gather data. You watch. You learn. Because if marriage taught me anything, it's that sometimes silence is louder than a fight. Now, about that camera, the romantic discovery, as I like to call it. It was pure accident. 2 weeks after the phone call, I was packing for a weekend logistics conference in Dallas. Rachel was in the kitchen pretending to organize mail while sneakily scrolling through her phone. I was tossing shirts into a suitcase when I heard this faint beeping sound near her vanity. At first, I thought it was her electric toothbrush, or maybe our cat, Muffin, who had a knack for knocking over expensive things. But then I saw it, a tiny red light blinking from behind the perfume bottles. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it resurrected my common sense. I moved the makeup bag aside and found a small black device, my device, to be precise. Months ago, I'd installed a mini security camera after complaining about weird noises in the night. Rachel had rolled her eyes at me, called me paranoid, and told me I watched too many spy thrillers. I forgot all about it. Apparently, she didn't. I sat on the bed, plugged the SD card into my laptop, and braced myself. If this were a movie, dramatic music would have started playing right then. The screen loaded, and there she was, Rachel, in perfect lighting, doing something I can only describe as Oscar-worthy stupidity. She was applying purple and yellow makeup to her own cheek, tilting her head, checking angles, and then taking photos. She even paused mid-application to sigh and mutter, "He'll never see this coming." My brain short-circuited. You ever feel every emotion at once? Anger, confusion, disbelief, heartbreak. It's like emotional roulette, and the ball just kept landing on WTF. I watched her practice crying faces in the mirror. Literal crying faces. She'd tear up, look at herself, shake her head, and say, "Too much." Then she'd try again. If there were awards for psychological warfare, she'd have cleaned house. I sat there in total silence for at least 10 minutes, just staring at the laptop. Then I laughed. One of those hollow, humorless laughs that sound like they belong in a therapy session. "At least she has good contouring technique," I said out loud to no one. Because when your wife's fake bruises become your evening entertainment, humor's all that's left between you and madness. I didn't confront her that night either. Nope. I decided to play dumb and collect more evidence. The next day, I acted like everything was fine, kissed her on the cheek, made breakfast, cracked my usual dad jokes about how burnt toast is just charcoal with ambition. She laughed, probably because she thought she was winning. Meanwhile, I was backing up the footage on 3 drives like a man securing nuclear codes. I started noticing more details after that. Her new obsession with documenting everything. She'd take selfies showing off the bruises, sometimes even asking me to stand near her. Once, she said, "Can you put your arm around me?" And I swear I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes when I hesitated. I realized she wasn't asking for affection. She was staging evidence. The betrayal hid in waves. It wasn't just that she was lying. It was that she was rewriting history, painting me as something monstrous when all I'd ever done wrong was forget anniversaries and occasionally snore like a leaf blower. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could share a bed with you while planning your destruction. That's when I started digging. I called an old friend, Nate, who worked in IT and owed me a few favors from our college days. "Hey," I said, "hypothetically, if someone wanted to check phone records and maybe track a number to a certain divorce attorney named Victor, how illegal would that be?" Nate chuckled. "Illegal enough that I'm in. Text me the number." Within a week, he had enough digital breadcrumbs to feed an army of lawyers. Late-night texts between Rachel and Victor discussing strategy, custody narratives, and public sympathy. They even had code words. She called me Subject A, like I was part of a science experiment. There was also mention of a Harper, who would later appear in my life as the attorney with the resting wrath face. So, yeah, I had the footage, the messages, the motive. I just needed timing. Because timing, as Mason later said, is the difference between justice and a very expensive therapy bill. But life wasn't done mocking me yet. One Sunday morning, Rachel walked into the living room wearing sunglasses, indoors, and announced, "Michael, we need to talk." I muted the TV, braced for impact, and tried to look like a supportive husband. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice trembling in that way people practice when they want to sound fragile. "You've been different. Distant. Angry." I sipped my coffee. "Angry. Yes. The kids feel it too," she said, lowering her voice. "You've scared us." I almost spit out my drink. "Scared you?" "Rachel, the scariest thing I've done this month is try to assemble that IKEA bookshelf." She ignored the joke. "I think it's best if we take some space." Now, normally, when someone says space, they mean emotional breathing. Room. Rachel meant legal chess move. I saw it in her eyes. She was laying groundwork for the Abusive Husband Forced Separation Act. I nodded slowly and said, "If that's what you need." Because sarcasm might be my default setting, but I wasn't stupid enough to show my hand. The next week, she started taking photos around the house. Random things. A broken lamp, courtesy of our cat, a scratch on the wall, my empty beer bottles, all staged neatly like a crime scene exhibit. I almost asked if she wanted better lighting. My humor kept me sane. When she started acting like I was the villain in her personal telenovela, I started narrating my life like a sitcom. Previously, on Married and Misled, I'd mutter to myself while making coffee. It was either that or lose my mind. Then came the day she slipped. I came home early from work and heard voices in the dining room. Rachel's and a man's. Not Victor, not anyone I knew. This guy sounded like he belonged in a true crime podcast. I peeked through the hallway, and there she was, sitting across from some slick-looking stranger in a suit, whispering about settlement numbers and contingency plans. She spotted me mid-sentence, and the look on her face could have powered a horror movie. "Who's this?" I asked casually, leaning on the doorway. "This is just a friend," she stammered. "Ah," I said. "The kind who wears a Rolex and brings legal pads?" He mumbled something about confidential consultation and practically sprinted out the door. I didn't stop him. I just looked at Rachel and smiled. That calm, quiet smile that says, "I know more than you think I do." That night, I copied every file, every text, every second of footage onto a private cloud folder named Plan B. Because when your marriage starts to feel like espionage, you learn to back up everything. Your files, your sanity, your heart. I wish I could say I confronted her dramatically, maybe with a monologue and background music. But the truth is, I didn't. I waited, because I knew she'd make her move soon, and when she did, I wanted to be ready. Not angry, not broken, ready. I spent those weeks playing the perfect husband, school drop-offs, dinners, polite conversation. She probably thought she was nailing her performance. Meanwhile, every date night and family photo was just another step closer to her public downfall. Looking back, that's when I stopped loving her. Not out of rage, but out of clarity. Love can survive mistakes, even lies, but not deliberate destruction. Once someone starts painting bruises for profit, the relationship's not on life support. It's in the morgue. So yeah, that's how I found the camera and my spine. I didn't know it then, but that tiny blinking red light was about to save my life. And if you're wondering whether I felt bad about spying on my wife, let me put it this way. If you're plotting to ruin me on national television, you don't get privacy points. Sometimes love ends with a goodbye. Other times, it ends with an SD card and a sarcastic smile. Mine did both. Winning feels different when your life's on fire. You expect a parade, confetti, maybe a choir singing, "We told you so." What you get instead is silence, exhaustion, and a headache that could qualify for workers' comp. That's what my first courtroom victory felt like. A technical win served on a rusted platter. The kind of win where everyone claps, but you still smell smoke. The footage had done its job. Rachel's makeup masterpiece, her grand performance of "Help, I'm married to a monster," collapsed faster than a bad souffle. The judge ordered a pause in proceedings, pending further verification of evidence. Translation: they had to figure out how to politely say, "Oops, our bad," without writing it into law books. But court victories don't feel like movies. There's no dramatic music swelling in the background, no grateful hugs. There's just you, your lawyer, and a bunch of strangers pretending your life is an episode of Law and Order, Midlife Crisis Unit. When the gavel came down that morning, Mason grinned like a cat that had swallowed a whole law library. He whispered, "We did it, Mike. This changes everything." I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen enough courtroom dramas to know the first victory is just a prologue to round two. Rachel didn't say a word. She just sat there, stiff as a wax figure, eyes darting like she was trying to calculate how fast she could dig another trap. Her lawyer, Harper Dawes, a woman whose face had the emotional range of a granite countertop, leaned in to whisper something to her. Probably, "Don't cry. Crying's for losers, and your waterproof mascara can't handle it." The judge dismissed everyone, and just like that, I was free to go. Free. What a joke. I walked out of that courthouse with Mason beside me, and the hallway exploded with noise. Reporters, microphones, flashing lights, like I'd just stepped off a reality TV set. One of them yelled, "Mr. Rowan, do you have a comment?" Another one shouted, "Did you really have proof your wife lied?" A third asked, "How does it feel to clear your name?" How does it feel? I wanted to say, like drinking lukewarm coffee after surviving a car crash. Mason threw his arm around me and muttered, "Say nothing. Smile if you can." So I smiled, the kind of tight, polite smile people give in mugshots. It didn't fool anyone. Outside, the air was sharp, the kind that burns your throat and tastes like new beginnings you don't trust yet. The courthouse stairs stretched out in front of me, and I took them slow, one step at a time, like an old man leaving a boxing ring after round 12. My mother was waiting at the bottom, small, fragile, and heartbreakingly hopeful. She'd flown in from Florida, because apparently, when your son's accused of being a domestic terrorist with a mortgage, it makes the news down there too. "Michael," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "They said you won." "Temporarily," I said. "Like renting peace." She hugged me tight. The kind of hug that smells like home and worry. I hadn't realized how much I needed it until then. But even hugs can't fix what public humiliation breaks. By the time I checked my phone, it was full. Calls from reporters, voicemails from people I barely remembered, and texts from investors that all said the same polite panic. "We need to talk." See, I co-founded Rowan Freight 10 years ago, a small shipping company that turned into a multi-state operation. We moved goods faster than gossip in a small town. But success doesn't mean squat when your name gets dragged through the mud. Business partners see domestic violence trial and stop seeing logistics genius. They see headline risk. That afternoon, I drove back to the office. My car's GPS kept rerouting me because apparently, even technology wanted to help me avoid the disaster ahead. When I walked into the lobby, everyone suddenly remembered how fascinating the floor was. Conversation stopped. The intern dropped her pen twice. Janet, my assistant, looked at me with the kind of pity that's worse than hate. "You okay, boss?" "Define okay," I said. "Because if it means still legally human, then sure." She nodded awkwardly. "The board wants to meet tomorrow." Of course they did. Nothing says support like a mandatory meeting to discuss your potential replacement. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my rental apartment, the kind of place with carpet that smells like disappointment and old pizza, staring at the ceiling fan while the local news replayed the footage. The anchor said, "Developments in the Rowan case show potential fabrication of evidence." My name was back on the screen, and for once, it wasn't followed by alleged abuser. But it didn't feel like redemption. It felt like a stay of execution. I poured myself a drink. Cheap bourbon in a mug because I hadn't unpacked glasses yet, and whispered, "To survival." It sounded pathetic even to me. My phone buzzed. It was Mason. "You watching the news?" "Yeah," I said. "Feels weird seeing my life with commercial breaks." He chuckled softly. "Enjoy the win, Mike. You earned it." "Sure," I said. "It's just, it doesn't feel like winning. Feels like surviving a plane crash and realizing you're stranded in the ocean." "Then tread water," he said. "Tomorrow's the rescue." Easier said than done. The next morning, I showed up at the office early. The silence was different this time, heavier. My co-founder, Greg Walters, was already there, leaning against the conference table. Greg's the kind of guy who can smell profit and fear in equal measure. He's also the kind who'll smile at you while checking your pulse for weakness. "Mike," he said, voice too casual. "Hell of a day yesterday." "Understatement of the century," I said. He gestured for me to sit. "Look, man, I believe you. Everyone saw the video. It's insane. But investors are nervous. They're calling it reputational risk." "Reputational risk," I repeated. "Funny, they didn't care about risk when I was making them millions." He sighed. "They'll come around. Just stay quiet. Let it die down." "Stay quiet," I said, raising an eyebrow. "I've been quiet for months, Greg. Silence almost cost me my life. I'm done whispering." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. We both knew silence was safer, even if it tasted like surrender. After he left, I sat in my office staring at the wall where Rachel's family portrait used to hang. She'd taken it down before she left, petty symbolism at its finest. In its place was a pale square of clean paint, like the ghost of better days. The press didn't stop. The next day, a reporter cornered me outside the office. "Mr. Rowan, any comments on the allegations being disproven?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, don't believe everything you contour." She blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "Nothing," I said. "Just a bad joke." It became my coping mechanism. Humor, sarcasm, deflection. They say laughter is the best medicine, but in my case, it was the only thing not trying to bill me hourly. Still, I couldn't shake the emptiness. You can clear your name on paper, but in people's heads, You're still guilty until proven newsworthy again. My mother called every night, telling me to stay strong. My son, Josh, barely spoke to me. My daughter, Emma, asked if mommy was still sad. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her mom's sadness is a weapon? The truth didn't fix that. It didn't fix the business calls that suddenly went unavailable. It didn't fix the friends who ghosted me because being associated with me was too complicated. It didn't fix the way strangers looked at me, curious, judgmental, cautious. Winning didn't give me back my life. It just stopped the bleeding. That weekend, Mason invited me to dinner. He said it'd be good to eat something that isn't bitterness. We went to a steakhouse downtown, the kind where they charge you for the privilege of chewing. Halfway through, he asked, "So what's next?" "Next?" I laughed. "Next I rebuild. Or I vanish. Depends on how long my sanity lasts." He leaned in. "Don't disappear, Mike. The system counts on that. You've got the truth on your side. Use it." I nodded, though I didn't feel brave. I felt tired, like a man who'd climbed a mountain just to realize he was on the wrong one. When I got back to my apartment, there was a note under the door. It was from Rachel's lawyer, hand-delivered. My stomach sank before I even opened it. The headline read, "Motion to reopen custody hearing." I laughed. Loud, manic, exhausted laughter. Of course, she wasn't done. Of course she'd reload. I sat on the couch, letter in one hand, drink in the other, and whispered, "You should have gone into acting, Rachel. You had the makeup skills for it." That's when I realized something crucial. Rachel wasn't just trying to win custody or money. She wanted control. Control over the narrative, over public opinion, over me. And I wasn't about to let her. The next morning, I called Mason. "She's coming back?" I said. "Of course she is," he replied. "People like Rachel don't stop until the credits roll." "Then let's make sure this movie ends on my terms." He hesitated. "You sure you're ready for another round?" I looked around my half-empty apartment, the boxes still stacked, the life half-lived. "I'm not ready," I said, "but I'm not backing down either." That first courtroom win, the one that made headlines, the one that technically cleared my name, didn't feel like justice. It felt like a ceasefire. And in that silence, I learned something important. Survival isn't the same as freedom. When the truth finally starts working in your favor, you don't celebrate. You prepare. Because if life's taught me anything, it's that every time you think you've hit rock bottom, someone out there's still digging. So yeah, I won. But it tasted like rust, like something old and bitter. And deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. Not even close. You ever think your life's finally starting to settle, and then the universe decides, nope, let's spice it up with a government agency? Yeah, that was me the morning the CPS call came through. 3 letters that can turn any parent into a panic-sweating wreck. I was in the middle of making breakfast. My son Josh wanted pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. My daughter Emma was arguing that syrup counts as a vegetable. And I was just happy the coffee maker hadn't gone on strike. Life, for the first time in months, felt almost normal. Then the phone rang. "Mr. Rowan?" The voice asked, calm and professional, like someone reading from a manual on how to ruin your day politely. "This is Child Protective Services. We've received a report regarding the safety of your children." Now, there are certain phrases in life that hit you like a freight train. "We need to talk. It's not you. It's me. Your card was declined." But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to child endangerment investigation. My throat went dry. "I'm sorry, what?" The woman continued, still in her calm robot voice. "A report was filed indicating your children may be in an unsafe environment. We'll need to schedule a home visit." My brain short-circuited. Unsafe environment? You mean the one with the Lego mines and snack wrappers? That unsafe environment. She didn't laugh. Government people never laugh. "Sir, I understand this is stressful, but we just need to confirm everything's okay." "Yeah," I said, because that's definitely what it sounds like. She gave me a time, 2 p.m., and hung up before I could finish hyperventilating. I just stood there holding the phone, staring at the skillet like it was supposed to explain what the hell just happened. "Dad," Josh asked, "why do you look like you saw a ghost?" I forced a smile. "Because, buddy, apparently ghosts work in child services now." The truth hit me in slow motion. Rachel had done it again. She'd turned the nuclear launch keys. After losing her courtroom stunt, she'd gone for the next easiest weapon, motherhood. I could practically hear her saying it. "He's unstable, Your Honor." He's dangerous. Think of the children. By 1:59, I'd scrubbed every inch of the house like Martha Stewart under duress. The CPS caseworkers arrived right on time, two of them. One tall guy in a navy sweater and a clipboard, and a woman who looked like she'd seen every excuse in the book and didn't believe a single one. "Mr. Rowan?" she said, flashing her badge like a magician about to ruin my day. "Yep, that's me. And welcome to what I like to call the world's least exciting crime scene." They didn't laugh. Tough crowd. They walked in and immediately started scanning the place like I'd hidden contraband behind the cereal boxes. They checked the fridge, opened cupboards, took notes on their clipboards like they were rating me for an episode of Parenting. The audit. Josh and Emma sat on the couch, looking confused and a little scared. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Emma whispered. That question sliced through me like paper on skin. I knelt beside her and said, "No, sweetheart. These people just have to make sure Daddy keeps the house as clean as Grandma's." The woman, Ms. Lewis, knelt too, smiling in that overly gentle way people do when they're trying to look friendly but still think you might bite. "Emma, do you feel safe here with your dad?" Emma nodded. "Yeah. He makes pancakes and lets us stay up on Fridays." "Good," Ms. Lewis said, scribbling something on her clipboard. Josh piped up. "Can I tell you about the fort we built?" The man, Mr. Dunn, smiled faintly. "Maybe later, champ." The inspection went on for what felt like hours. They checked the bedrooms, took photos of the pantry, asked questions that sounded innocent but felt loaded. "Does your dad ever yell? Has he ever scared you? What happens when you get in trouble?" Josh said, "He just makes us clean our rooms." "Ah," Dunn said, writing it down like that was suspicious. When they finally left, Ms. Lewis handed me a card. "We'll follow up within 2 weeks with a report." I took it and smiled through gritted teeth. "Can't wait. Maybe next time we can do brunch and background checks." They didn't smile. Again, the second the door closed, I sank onto the couch. The kids ran to their rooms, blissfully unaware of how close I was to losing my mind. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to scream. Rachel had done it. She'd found another way to weaponize concern. That was her talent, turning empathy into artillery. Later that night, I called Mason. "She called CPS," I said flatly. He sighed like a man who needed a second salary just to deal with my life. "Figures. I'll get ahead of it. They have to investigate, but as long as there's nothing to find." "There isn't," I snapped. "Unless they count mismatched socks as abuse." He chuckled softly. "Mike, I know. But listen, document everything. Who came, what they said, what they looked at. This is all evidence now." I looked at the business card on the table. "Ms. Lewis and Mr. Dunn," I muttered. "They were thorough." "Good," Mason said. "That means they'll see through the bullshit." "Yeah," I said. "Unless Rachel sends them an Oscar reel." The following week was pure anxiety. Every time the phone rang, my heart rate spiked. I cleaned obsessively, cooked gourmet meals for the kids, even organized their closets, which, in hindsight, may have looked suspiciously like bribery. And of course, my dear neighbor, Mrs. Hernandez, decided it was her moment to shine. She was 70, retired, and had the moral compass of a gossip column. The CPS team interviewed her, and she told them she often saw the children alone outside while their father was inside. What she didn't mention was that inside meant me sitting on the porch drinking coffee 5 feet away. When Mason read her statement, I said, "Can we sue her for character defamation and chronic nosiness?" He smirked. Tempting, but no. Then came the nanny. Oh, the nanny. I'd fired her months ago after catching her scrolling TikTok while Emma nearly fell off the trampoline. She claimed she'd witnessed emotional volatility. That's legalese for he told me to put her phone away. It felt like every bad decision I'd ever made had formed a union and decided to strike at once. When the CPS report finally came back, it was 3 pages long and so bureaucratic it could put caffeine to sleep. The summary: no evidence of abuse or neglect found. Case closed. I read it 3 times just to make sure it wasn't sarcasm. Mason called the next morning. "Told you they'd find nothing," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "But Rachel's gonna spin it anyway. Probably tell everyone I bribed them with a Costco membership." He laughed. "Let her. Every lie she tells builds your case stronger. Trust me, this is going to blow back on her eventually." Eventually, I said, isn't fast enough. But he was right. I just didn't know it yet. That weekend, Rachel tried to pick up the kids for her custody visit. all smiles and perfume like she wasn't the emotional equivalent of a landmine. I opened the door, arms crossed. CPS says hi, I said. Her smile faltered for a second. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't, I said. Must have been another concerned citizen who knows our address and hates my curtains. She rolled her eyes. Michael, you're paranoid. Maybe if you didn't act so defensive. Defensive? I laughed. You faked Bruises, called government agents on me, and tried to take my business. Defensive doesn't begin to cover it. She leaned in close, voice low. You think this is over? I smiled. No, Rachel. I think you just keep losing prettier. She left in a huff, and I stood there, hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It hit me then how dangerous she'd become. She wasn't fighting for love or family or even money anymore. She was fighting for the story. She wanted to be the heroine of a tragedy, and she didn't care how many people she destroyed to sell it. That night, I poured myself another drink, bourbon again, because irony likes consistency, and stared out the window. I thought about the kids asleep upstairs, about the way Emma had hugged me tighter that night, and how Josh had asked if we could watch The Incredibles again. Because to them, life was still simple. Heroes and villains were easy to spot. If only it stayed that way. The CPS ordeal didn't break me. It taught me something crucial. Rachel wasn't fighting fair, and I couldn't keep playing defense. Mason was right. Every false accusation, every manipulative stunt was evidence. I started keeping a log, dates, names, everything. I recorded phone calls, legally, mostly, saved texts, even started using an app that timestamps interactions. If she wanted to wage war in the court of public opinion, I was building a fortress. I remember Mason telling me during one of our late-night calls, Mike, she's throwing grenades. You just keep catching them and handing them back. Yeah, I said, except my hands are starting to burn. He laughed. That's called progress. When the CPS case officially closed, I took the kids out for ice cream. We sat in the park, watching the sunset, Emma's face smeared with chocolate, Josh bragging about finishing his cone first. For a brief moment, I forgot about courts and lawyers and Rachel. It was just us. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Enjoy your victory. It won't last. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. No signature, but I didn't need one. Rachel had gone quiet for a few days. Too quiet. And quiet, I'd learned, was her favorite setup for chaos. I put my phone down, looked at the kids, and smiled anyway. Let's get extra toppings, I said. Because if the bullets were going to keep coming, I might as well enjoy dessert between the shots. If hell had an accounting department, Rachel would have been the CEO. I thought the CPS fiasco was the grand finale of her chaos symphony, but clearly, my ex had more instruments in her orchestra of ruin. The next chapter of her revenge tour arrived in a crisp envelope labeled Request for Financial Disclosure. Now, if you've never had to deal with a financial audit during a divorce, let me translate that. It's basically an IRS colonoscopy administered by people who hate joy. When Mason handed me the envelope, he sighed like a man whose job involved breaking bad news to puppies. She's requesting a full forensic review of Rowan Freight, he said. She wants access to your business accounts, tax returns, and any personal expenditures tied to the company. I blinked. So basically everything? Everything, he confirmed. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my face, and groaned. She's trying to take the company, isn't she? Not take it, Mason said, just bleed it dry. She's claiming financial concealment and mismanagement. If the court buys it, she can demand up to 50%. 50%. The number hung in the air like a bad smell. I built Rowan Freight from a rented storage unit and 2 borrowed trucks. I ate ramen noodles while negotiating with clients and slept in the damn office during the early years. And now she wanted half, because apparently betrayal comes with a bonus plan. She's also requesting temporary alimony, Mason added carefully. $22,000 a month. I sat up straight. $22,000? Is she feeding the kids or renting NASA? He shrugged. It's a negotiation tactic. We'll fight it. I laughed bitterly. Fight it. Mason, she's fighting dirty. She's not just throwing punches. She's digging for bones. The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents, bank statements, and sleepless nights. A forensic accountant named Gregson showed up at my office, briefcase in hand, expression permanently set to I don't trust you. He looked like he ate spreadsheets for breakfast. Mr. Rowan, he said, sitting across from me. This will be a full review of all business and personal transactions for the last 5 years. Great, I said, forcing a smile. You'll find I'm guilty of nothing but bad coffee habits. He didn't laugh, not even a smirk. These financial people have the sense of humor of a malfunctioning calculator. For days, my office turned into a paper jungle. Gregson asked for receipts, invoices, contracts, tax filings. I half expected him to request baby pictures next. Every time I handed him something, he'd nod solemnly and say, "We'll verify this." Like I'd forged a Target receipt for fun. Meanwhile, Rachel was out there performing her usual martyr routine. She'd post vague status updates online. Some battles are harder than others, but truth always wins, Red Heart. And, of course, her friends would swarm the comments section. "You're so strong. Stay brave. Men can be monsters." It was like watching a cult that worships hashtags. I stopped scrolling. Every time I saw her name, my blood pressure auditioned for Cirque du Soleil. Mason warned me, "Don't engage online. They want you angry." Too late. I was angry, but I was also something worse, tired. The kind of tired you can't fix with coffee or vacation. One day, while Gregson was knee-deep in company ledgers, he asked, "Who's Daniel Reese?" "My business partner," I said cautiously. "Why?" Gregson's eyebrows twitched. "Interesting. There are several expense reimbursements under his name that also appear under your wife's account." My stomach dropped. "What kind of reimbursements?" He turned the laptop toward me. There it was, transaction after transaction. Dinners, hotels, consulting fees. And right there, in neat black font, recipient, Rachel Rowan. Authorized by D. Reese. Son of a... I slammed my hand on the desk. Gregson jumped. "Mr. Rowan, I just record facts," he said quickly. I stood up, pacing. So she's been working with him. My partner. My own damn CFO. I remembered that restaurant video, the one a mutual friend sent me weeks ago. Rachel and Daniel having dinner, leaning in close, laughing. At the time, I'd written it off as a client meeting. God, I was stupid. When I told Mason, he cursed softly. She's using him to build a narrative, collusion, hidden funds, whatever story fits. We'll need to get ahead of it. I slammed my fist on the table. She's not building a narrative, Mason. She's building a damn empire out of my destruction. He looked at me calmly. Then it's time to build yours back. The next court session was a circus. Rachel sat across from me, perfectly put together in a cream blazer and pearls, looking like she'd just stepped out of a Good Housekeeping ad for sociopaths. Harper, her lawyer, stood up and began the show. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "we have reason to believe Mr. Rowan has been concealing assets and manipulating company finances to avoid equitable distribution." She held up a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. "We have records of undisclosed transactions and internal transfers lacking documentation." I turned to Mason. "What is she talking about?" He whispered, bullshit wrapped in buzzwords. Don't react. But I did react, internally, because I knew how this looked. In divorce court, perception eats facts for breakfast. The judge looked unimpressed but curious. "Mr. Rowan, do you have any response to these claims?" Mason stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have a full financial audit in progress, and every transaction will be accounted for." The defense asks for patience as the facts unfold, unlike the fiction presented today. The courtroom murmured. Rachel frowned, just slightly, a crack in her porcelain mask. We left the courthouse under a cloud of camera flashes. I didn't say a word. Mason drove. I just stared out the window, watching my reflection blur against the city lights. "Don't let her see you crack," Mason said quietly. "I'm not cracking," I muttered. "I'm calculating." Because that's the thing about being falsely accused. After the rage burns out, you get precise. Strategic. You stop asking why and start asking how to make it hurt back. That night, I went home to a living room littered with documents. I started connecting dots, dates, signatures, wire transfers. Daniel's name kept popping up like a virus. I texted Mason, "Check into Reese. Something's off." He replied within minutes, "Already on it." 2 days later, Mason called. "You were right. Reese has been moving company money through a personal LLC. Guess whose name appears on the beneficiary list?" I didn't even need to answer. Rachel. That name, that face, that voice pretending to tremble in court. She was behind every thread unraveling my life. I didn't know whether to scream or applaud her criminal creativity. Mason continued, "We can use this, but we have to play it slow. Let them keep digging their hole." Slow wasn't my style. I wanted to storm into her house and read her the bank statements like bedtime stories. But I played along, because I knew this wasn't about proving innocence anymore. It was about reclaiming control. In the meantime, I did what every emotionally damaged businessman does. I threw myself into work. Rowan Freight became my war bunker. Every delivery, every report, every late-night spreadsheet was armor. My employees kept their distance. You could smell scandal on me like cologne. Still, I kept pushing. I had to, because if I stopped, even for a second, the grief and rage would catch up. One night, I found myself sitting alone in the office, staring at an old company photo, me, Rachel, and Daniel at our 5-year anniversary party. I was holding a champagne glass. Rachel was leaning on me, smiling. Daniel had his hand on my shoulder. I stared at that hand for a long time, then crumpled the photo and threw it in the trash. I muttered, "Never again." The next day, Mason called again. "We've got a court date for the audit hearing. Bring everything. This is where we turn it around." I laughed dryly. "You make it sound like a sports game." He chuckled. "It kind of is. And right now, we're down by 20. But trust me, we've got better players." At the hearing, Harper strutted in like she'd already won. Rachel followed, feigning frailty, a white blouse, minimal makeup, the soft, trembling hands of a woman wronged. I could practically hear the theme music she'd picked for herself. Mason started his defense, walking the jury through the evidence. Receipts, bank records, time-stamped transfers. "Every transaction is legitimate," he said. "And what's more, several of the so-called concealed accounts were established by Ms. Rowan and Mr. Reese for the purpose of embezzlement." Harper objected, "Of course. Speculation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof, Mr. Colby?" Mason smiled, that wolfish grin I'd come to love. "Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit C." He clicked a button, and up on the screen appeared bank logs, clear as daylight, showing money wired from Rowan Freight into accounts owned by Reese Holdings, LLC. The listed secondary beneficiary, Rachel Rowan. The courtroom gasped. It was déjà vu, another bombshell, another Rachel silence. She sat frozen, jaw tight, eyes darting to her lawyer like, "Fix it." But Harper couldn't fix it. She could only sputter. This doesn't prove intent." Mason stepped forward. "Intent? Then maybe Exhibit D will help." He pulled out a printed email chain between Reese and Rachel discussing fund allocation and ensuring Mike doesn't find out. The judge read it quietly, then looked at Rachel. "Ms. Rowan, do you care to explain this?" Rachel's face went pale. Harper placed a hand on her arm, whispering something urgent, but it was too late. The damage was done. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I finally exhaled. When the gavel finally came down that day, the judge ordered a hold on all disputed assets until further review. Rachel's claws loosened, not gone, but slipping. Outside, Mason clapped me on the back. "Told you, better players." I smirked. "Yeah. But I'm still getting tired of the game." He nodded. "Then let's make sure the next round ends it for good." That night, I went home, poured myself one last drink, and opened my laptop. I wasn't just a defendant anymore. I was a man on offense. Rachel had used every trick she had. Lies, pity, manipulation. Now it was my turn to play smarter. Because if she wanted a war built on paperwork, fine. I had an army of proof and a lawyer who loved fire. And I was finally ready to light the match. You ever walk into a courtroom and feel like you're walking into your own funeral rehearsal? That's what day one of the trial of the century, as one overexcited reporter called it, felt like. My name was plastered everywhere. Rowan versus Rowan. Freight fortune fraud? It was like the tabloids had formed a jazz band, and I was their favorite solo. Even the bailiff looked at me like he'd already Googled my Wikipedia page. The courtroom was packed. Family law groupies, reporters, distant relatives who suddenly remembered my number, and that one guy who always seems to attend trials for the snacks. The air reeked of perfume, paper, and tension. At the front sat the judge, the same one from our earlier hearings, a man whose resting face looked like, "Don't waste my time," had been tattooed into his soul. Mason and I took our seats at the defense table. He looked sharp, calm, every inch the unflappable attorney. Me? I looked like someone who'd aged 5 years in 5 months. Rachel walked in moments later, escorted by her legal pit bull, Harper Dawes. She wore all black this time. Dramatic, sleek, widowcore chic. The only thing missing was a veil and a tragic piano soundtrack. She didn't look at me, not once. But her posture said everything. She still thought she could win this. The clerk called the case. Harper stood, her tone sweet but predatory. Your Honor, this case is not about bitterness. It's about accountability. Mr. Rowan manipulated finances, hid assets, and emotionally terrorized my client for years. There it was, terrorized. A word that makes juries shift in their seats and Google how to spot an abuser. I didn't even flinch. Mason told me not to react no matter what she said. Your calm is your credibility, he'd whispered before court. So, I sat there, hands folded, face neutral, while inside my mind screamed, what the hell is she talking about? Rachel took the stand on day 2. She started crying before she even reached the microphone. It wasn't new. She had those tears on a retainer plan. He controlled everything, she said between delicate sobs. I couldn't even buy groceries without asking. Now, for context, Rachel's idea of groceries once included $200 bottles of wine, imported cheese, and flowers for herself, because aesthetics are self-care. But I let her spin her fantasy. The jury nodded sympathetically. Half of them looked like they wanted to adopt her on the spot. Mason leaned in and whispered, they're falling for it. I can see that, I muttered, biting back sarcasm. Should I pass around the tissues or just my wallet? He smirked. Wait for cross. Then came the audio recording. Harper pressed play like she'd been waiting all week for this moment. A grainy sound filled the room. My voice, clipped and rearranged, saying, dig until she breaks. The room froze. My heart stopped. It sounded exactly like me. Angry, cold, cruel. The jury turned toward me, faces shifting from sympathy to horror in real time. Even Mason looked momentarily thrown off. Your Honor, Harper said, voice syrup sweet. This recording was provided by a former employee. It clearly shows Mr. Rowan's intent to destroy my client emotionally and financially. Mason shot to his feet. Objection. Unauthenticated, heavily edited. The judge held up a hand. Overruled, for now. Continue. I sat there, staring at the screen, realizing what they'd done. They'd taken multiple clips from business meetings, me talking about competitors, not my wife, and sliced them together into a masterpiece of slander. It was audio Frankenstein. Rachel sniffled theatrically. He said that to my face once. I remember shaking. Oh, she remembered shaking all right. Probably from laughter after faking it on her MacBook. When cross-examination came, Mason went surgical. Calm, precise, unrelenting. Mrs. Rowan, you claim these recordings are authentic? Yes, she said softly. And where exactly did you get them? She blinked. From my husband's office. I found them. Found them? Mason raised an eyebrow. In your husband's locked, private office? Yes. So you broke in? Answer the question. Her lip trembled. Yes. The jury's head snapped up. Mason smiled faintly. Interesting. So you illegally obtained the recordings that you now claim prove your case? Harper objected. The judge overruled. Mason paced slowly. Mrs. Rowan, you also allege you felt unsafe during your marriage. Can you explain this photo? He handed her Exhibit 27, a picture of Rachel and me at a company gala. Her hand on my chest, smiling, kissing my cheek. The date stamp? 2 weeks before her first abuse allegation. Rachel hesitated. That was before things got bad. Of course, Mason said, nodding like a man humoring a child. And this? He pulled up another image. Rachel on vacation in Cabo, 2 months after she'd filed the restraining order. Her face went pale. That was work. Work, Mason repeated, glancing at the jury. On a beach. With margaritas. While allegedly fearing for your life. The jury chuckled. The judge even smirked. I nearly stood and clapped. But Rachel wasn't done. She adjusted her tone, all wounded dignity. He's lying. He's manipulating the narrative. That's what he does. Mason didn't flinch. Ma'am, you've used that word a lot, manipulation. Would you call secretly filming yourself applying fake bruises manipulation? The silence that followed could have cured hiccups. The jurors looked like someone had just spoiled the end of a mystery movie. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. Oh, I think you do, Mason said. And suddenly the courtroom screen lit up with that footage, the video of her stippling makeup onto her cheek. Gasps erupted again. One juror muttered, "Oh, damn." Rachel's mask shattered. Harper tried to stand, but even the judge cut her off. "Sit down, Ms. Dawes." The hearing recessed for lunch, but the damage was irreversible. The media outside went nuclear. "Rachel Rowan's lies exposed again," one headline screamed. But just when I thought it was over, Harper regrouped. After lunch, she pulled out another trick, a whistleblower affidavit. Some mysterious ex-employee claimed I'd funneled money into offshore trusts under a relative's name. It was beautifully evil, specific enough to sound credible, vague enough to be impossible to immediately disprove. Mason's jaw tightened. "We weren't informed of this evidence." "New testimony," Harper said smugly. The judge allowed it. Of course he did. Because in family court, rules bend like yoga instructors. The witness, a middle-aged man named Richard Voss, took the stand. I didn't recognize him, but apparently, he'd worked briefly in our logistics department. He told a story so dramatic it should have come with a movie score. "Mr. Rowan ordered me to move funds offshore. He said, and I quote, 'No one's taking what's mine.'" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how bad it was. I've said a lot of things in life, most of them sarcastic, but that? Please. Even my rage has better grammar. Mason cross-examined him like a cat playing with a mouse. "Mr. Voss, how long did you work for Rowan Freight?" 6 months. "And were you fired for falsifying reports?" Richard hesitated. It was a misunderstanding." "Of course," Mason said, smiling. "And did you receive any compensation from Ms. Rowan or her associates for your testimony?" "I was reimbursed for travel." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Travel? To which exotic destination?" "The courthouse." The courtroom laughed. Even I grinned. Still, the damage was done. The jurors looked torn. The word offshore echoed like poison. When the day ended, Mason said, "They're trying to drown us in half-truths. Don't bite." "Bite," I said, exhausted. "Mason, I'm practically chewing concrete to stay calm." We walked out into a storm of microphones and flashing cameras. Someone yelled, "Michael, did you hide assets?" Another screamed, "Do you still love her?" I looked straight at them and said, "Love her? I don't even like her accountant." The clip went viral by evening. At least my sarcasm had good PR. That night, back in my rented apartment, I replayed everything in my head. The fake audio, the lies, the tears, the jurors' faces. It felt like no matter what I did, the truth couldn't shout loud enough. Rachel had mastered emotional theater, and I was stuck performing as the stoic villain. Mason called around 11 p.m. "We're not done yet," he said. "We found something." "What?" "That affidavit? The metadata's wrong. It was created 3 days ago on Harper Dawes' personal laptop." I sat up straight. "You're kidding." "I never kid about fraud," he said. "We're pulling IP logs. If this pans out, it's not just perjury, it's conspiracy." For the first time that week, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of grin that happens when a cornered man finds a weapon. "Good," I said, "because I'm done defending myself. It's time we show them what happens when you frame the wrong guy." Mason chuckled. "Now you're thinking like a lawyer." "More like a survivor," I said. I hung up, stared at the ceiling, and let out a long breath. The trial wasn't over. The war wasn't won. But for the first time, the balance was shifting. The odds, the ones stacked so high they looked like skyscrapers, had started to crumble. And I swore, right then and there, when the truth finally tore through, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would burn their lies so clean the smell would linger for years. There's a moment, right before a verdict is read, when the whole world holds its breath. The judge looks down at the papers. The jurors stare ahead like statues, and even the clock stops ticking out of respect for the chaos about to unfold. For me, that moment felt like waiting for the universe to decide whether I got to be a man again or a meme. The courtroom was packed tighter than a Black Friday line outside Best Buy. Everyone wanted to witness the grand finale of the Rowan versus Rowan saga. You could feel the collective excitement of people who loved tragedy as long as it wasn't theirs. The reporters were practically vibrating. One even whispered, "He's trending again," like it was an Olympic achievement. Rachel sat across from me in her signature weaponized elegance. Hair tied back, black dress, no jewelry except her wedding ring, which she still wore because symbolism is her love language. Her expression was calm, the kind of calm that comes when someone's convinced they've already won. Beside her, Harper Dawes sat like an executioner waiting for the go signal. Mason leaned toward me. Whatever happens, we appeal. Don't react. Don't react. I whispered. Mason, that's like telling someone not to flinch during open-heart surgery. He gave me a small, reassuring smile. You've done harder things. Like marrying her. Before I could respond, the judge called for order. The clerk handed over the verdict forms. The sound of paper shuffling felt louder than thunder. My palms were slick. My jaw hurt from clenching. I glanced at Rachel. She didn't even look my way, just stared ahead, breathing slowly like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. On the matter of financial fraud, the foreman read, "We find the defendant liable." It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Liable. The word hit like a hammer. I didn't even hear the rest of the sentence. My brain just kept looping that one word like a broken record. The next part followed fast, like bullets. On concealment of assets, liable. On custody of minor children, awarded to the plaintiff. I felt my heart cave in on itself. Custody. The word echoed through me, sharp and final. Rachel didn't flinch. She simply tilted her chin up a little higher, like a queen accepting her crown. The judge spoke next. Mr. Rowan, this court finds sufficient evidence of deceptive financial practices and failure to provide full disclosure. 60% of Rowan freight will be transferred to Ms. Rowan pending appeal. 60%. She'd taken my life's work and turned it into her victory confetti. The gavel came down with a sound that might as well have been the closing of a coffin. Mason put a hand on my shoulder, steady, silent, professional. I didn't move. I couldn't. Reporters exploded into motion the second court adjourned. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. Mr. Rowan, do you plan to appeal? Did you hide assets? How do you feel about losing custody? How do I feel? Like someone reached into my chest, pulled out my lungs, and told me to give a statement. That's how I felt. Mason shielded me as we walked out, muttering, "Keep walking." Outside, the media swarm grew. I caught a glimpse of Rachel smiling faintly for the cameras. Just a small, practiced smile, the kind you give when you know public opinion is your favorite child. I wanted to yell. I wanted to tell the world about her lies, her forged recordings, her fake bruises. But Mason's words echoed in my head, "Don't react." So I didn't. I just got in the car, shut the door, and sat there while the noise faded into glass-muted silence. Mason sighed, removing his glasses. "We'll file an appeal. We'll prove the affidavit was falsified, the accounting fabricated. It's not over." I laughed, a low, broken sound. "Feels pretty over." "Mike," he said gently, "it's only over when you stop fighting." I stared out the window, watching photographers chase Rachel's car like paparazzi chasing a royal scandal. She just won everything. He shook his head. She won the spotlight. That's not the same thing. That night, I went home to an apartment that suddenly felt too quiet, too clean, too temporary. I poured whiskey into a mug because I couldn't find a glass that didn't remind me of her. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, messages, news alerts. Businessman Michael Rowan found liable in shocking trial. Wife of freight CEO wins custody battle amid financial scandal. It was all noise. Background static. The kind that crawls under your skin until you want to smash the phone just to hear silence again. At some point, I stopped checking the time. I just sat there, staring at the wall, thinking about my kids. About how Rachel would probably tell them I chose work over family. About how they believe her, because kids always believe the person who cries louder. When I finally slept, it was shallow, restless. I dreamed of courtroom lights and Rachel's fake tears. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart hammering like I'd run a marathon through hell. The next morning, Mason called early. "You ready to fight?" I didn't answer right away. "You ever get tired of being right?" "Only when the wrong people win," he said. He told me he'd found inconsistencies in the bank logs presented at trial. Rachel and Reese manipulated timestamps. If we can prove that, the verdict can be overturned. That word, overturned, felt like oxygen. But before I could even feel hope, reality reminded me it still had bills to collect. By noon, my email inbox was a graveyard of canceled contracts. Clients were reevaluating their business relationships. Translation: no one wants to work with the guy who just lost a high-profile trial. Greg Walters, my co-founder, called. "Mike, I'm sorry, man. The board's nervous. They want to temporarily suspend your management role until this clears up." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "So I built the company. paid everyone's salaries, and now I get a timeout. It's not personal, Greg said weakly. It's entirely personal, I snapped. Then, quieter. But I get it. You're protecting the brand. I hung up before he could reply. That evening, I tried calling my kids. Rachel didn't answer. She texted instead. They're asleep. Let's keep communication through lawyers. My hands shook as I typed back. They're my children, not legal exhibits. No reply. I stared at my reflection in the window. A man hollowed out by lies, framed by city lights that didn't care who won. For the next few days, the world moved on while I stood still. Rachel did interviews, soft focus, sympathetic lighting. The full redemption arc, it's been hard, she told one host, blinking perfectly timed tears. But I'm just focused on healing and being the best mom I can be. The audience clapped. Somewhere, a producer smiled. Somewhere, a sponsor wired her another appearance fee. And me? I became the villain who got what he deserved. But grief has a funny way of evolving. After the numbness wears off, it turns into something else, something colder, sharper. I wasn't angry anymore. I was motivated. I started gathering everything Mason had ever mentioned. The fake audio metadata, the fraudulent bank trails, the Reese LLC shell accounts. I printed them, highlighted them, laid them out across my dining table like a war map. If Rachel wanted to rewrite the narrative, fine. I'd write the sequel. I made calls to old friends in tech, to private investigators, to anyone who owed me a favor. One of them, Alex Monroe, a cyber forensics consultant, laughed when I told him the story. Dude, that's not a marriage. That's organized crime with wedding vows. He offered to help. Send me everything. I'll find the thread she missed. Careful, I said. She bites. He chuckled. So do I. Over the next few weeks, we worked quietly. Mason handled the legal appeal. Alex and his team handled the data audit. I stayed out of sight, letting the world believe I was licking my wounds. It made the comeback sweeter. Still, the emotional hangover was brutal. My mother called every few days, her voice gentle but weighted. Michael, sweetheart, you can rebuild. You always do. I don't want to rebuild, I told her once. I want to make sure she never gets to do this to anyone else. She sighed softly. Revenge doesn't heal, honey. Neither does losing everything to a liar. The silence on the line said she didn't have a counterargument. Weeks passed. The tabloids found new scandals to feed on. Rachel's spotlight dimmed slightly, though she still popped up on social media with captions like, New Beginnings Cherry Blossom, probably typed from the office I once owned. But then, one night, Alex called. You'll want to see this, he said. He sent over a file, screenshots of encrypted messages between Rachel and Daniel Reese. In them, they discussed moving funds, fixing statements, and keeping Mike too busy fighting to notice. The timestamps matched perfectly with the weeks leading up to the trial. I just sat there, staring at the screen, jaw tight. Every emotion I'd been suppressing came roaring back. Rage, vindication, disgust. This is it, I whispered. This, Alex said, is how you burn her kingdom down. The next morning, Mason reviewed the evidence. His grin returned. This isn't just grounds for appeal. This is grounds for prosecution. I leaned back, finally feeling something I hadn't felt in months, control. The verdict may have declared me guilty. The world may have believed her. But the truth? It was finally stretching its arms, waking up from the coma she'd put it in. And when it got out of bed, I swore it was going to run wild. The bankruptcy of my reputation wasn't the end, it was the receipt. Every lie Rachel cashed in would soon bounce. And I'd be there, front row, when the bill came due. Rock bottom doesn't announce itself with a crash. It sneaks up, sets up a folding chair, and asks how long you plan on staying. Mine came with cold coffee, unpaid invoices, and my name trending under fraud. I'd lost my company, my reputation, and my kids. The internet had turned me into a cautionary meme. When gaslighting backfires, the Michael Rowan story. It was poetic, if poetry were written in garbage fonts. So, I did the only logical thing left, I disappeared. I didn't move states or grow a beard, though both were tempting. I just went silent. No social media, no press statements, no lawyer interviews. Rachel thrived on attention, and silence is kryptonite to narcissists. Let her shout into the void. I'd become the void. The first week of exile was ugly. I couldn't go to the grocery store without someone whispering. One barista refused my credit card on moral grounds. Even my barber texted, "Hey, man, maybe lay low for a while. Don't want TMZ outside the shop." So I laid low. For a long time. That's when Mason called me one night. "Mike, I know you're off the grid, but I've got something," he said. "Unless it's the lottery numbers, I'm not interested." He chuckled. "Better. A way to get your life back. I've been talking to a few contacts. We can rebuild your case from the ground up, but we'll need help." "Help?" He grinned through the phone. "I'm talking specialists. The kind who make lies cry." Enter Alex Monroe, digital forensics savant and caffeine addict. The man spoke fluent binary and probably dreamt in Excel sheets. When we met at a dingy diner, he didn't even say hello. He just slid me a folder and said, "I've seen worse." Not much, but worse. Inside were screenshots, metadata reports, timestamps, and transaction trails Rachel had conveniently forgotten existed. "Your wife's been sloppy," Alex said between sips of burnt coffee. Her phone backed up to a shared cloud account. She never turned off auto-sync. "Please tell me that means what I think it means." He smirked. "It means she uploaded her own crimes to the internet." I love amateurs. I didn't know whether to laugh or propose to him. Next came Meena Patel, a PR strategist Mason called a shark in heels. She had a reputation for taking down billionaires, CEOs, and once, a televangelist who tried to ban her client's commercial. Nina was the opposite of Rachel. Calm, controlled, lethal without ever raising her voice. She met me in her glass office downtown. "Michael," she said, shaking my hand, "you've been framed as a villain in a story that was never yours. My job is to rewrite the script." I raised an eyebrow. "You think you can fix public opinion?" She smiled. "I don't fix it. I redirect it. People love two things, a scandal and a comeback. You've already nailed the first one." Her plan was simple. Vanish, gather evidence, then reemerge not as a victim, but as a revelation. "We'll make her look like what she is," Nina said. "A liar with better lighting." The final addition to my unlikely dream team was Elliot Shaw, ex-FBI analyst turned corporate investigator. His handshake felt like a background check. He'd spent 20 years tracking money through digital mazes. "You want proof of fraud?" he said. "I'll make her bank accounts sing." In less than a month, my silent comeback squad was assembled. Alex, tech; Nina, media; Elliot, money; and Mason, law. If Ocean's 11 had a divorce court edition, we were it, minus the tuxedos. Alex went first. He combed through Rachel's emails, cloud backups, and message history. Within days, he found enough red flags to decorate a parade. "Here's a fun one," he said one morning, grinning. "She transferred $80,000 from your joint account into her sister's charity. The same day, she filed the restraining order." "Her sister's charity?" "Yeah," he said, scrolling. "Except the charity doesn't exist. At least, not legally." Elliot confirmed it. The charity was a shell company under Rachel's maiden name. It funneled money into 2 offshore accounts tied to a corporate trust registered in Belize. The name on the trust? V. Lawton. "Victor," I muttered. "The lawyer she was calling." Elliot nodded. "And it gets better. Some of those funds trace back to your own company, the same missing assets she accused you of hiding." My jaw tightened. She stole from me and then accused me of theft? Nina looked up from her notes. Classic projection. Also a PR goldmine. We didn't just have breadcrumbs. We had a whole bakery. Alex kept digging. He unearthed voice memos Rachel had deleted but not permanently erased. One where she told her sister, "Once this verdict lands, we're done. He'll be bankrupt, and I'll be untouchable." Another where she laughed about how the crying thing always works on juries. Meanwhile, Elliot's forensic report read like an FBI thriller. "Here," he said, pointing to a flowchart that looked like a spider web on caffeine. Money moved from Reese Holdings LLC into 4 personal accounts tied to Rachel's cousin, her sister, and Harper Dawes' private trust. Guess what? All of them got deposits within 48 hours of the verdict. Mason leaned back, whistling low. Kickbacks. She paid for a guilty verdict. We stared at each other, a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. This wasn't just perjury or fraud. It was criminal conspiracy. That's when I realized the scope of it all. Rachel hadn't just tried to destroy me. She'd built a machine to do it. And now, piece by piece, we were dismantling it. Weeks passed in quiet efficiency. No leaks, no press, no drama. I'd show up at Alex's cluttered apartment every morning, coffee in hand, ready to sift through evidence. Nina coordinated timing, coaching me on public reentry. "We'll go nuclear," she said, "but on our schedule." Every night, I'd sit at my kitchen table, staring at pictures of my kids. Emma with her missing front tooth, Josh in his soccer uniform, mid-kick. I'd whisper, "Just a little longer, guys. Daddy's coming back." One night, Nina called. "We've got a window," she said. "Rachel's receiving an award next month. National Women of Resilience Gala. Perfect stage. Cameras, press, live broadcast." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're saying?" "Yes," she interrupted. "We expose her there. Publicly. Gracefully. Mercilessly." I laughed, a dark, cathartic sound. "You're good at this." "Reputation warfare is my cardio," she said. The team set everything in motion. Alex and Elliot synchronized evidence packages. Mason prepped legal motions in advance. Nina crafted the narrative, a slow, deliberate reveal designed to blindside her. "When we hit," she said, "we won't just clear your name. We'll erase hers." But before the storm came calm, deceptive, heavy calm. I walked through the city that week like a ghost. People no longer stared. The tabloids had moved on. I wasn't the villain anymore. I was irrelevant. And honestly, irrelevance is the most powerful disguise there is. By the time the gala approached, every detail was ready. Nina had arranged a donor guest list, complete with my fake alias. Michael Rowe, logistics philanthropist. Alex handled the tech. "One button," he said, handing me a small remote. "Press it during her speech. The screens will switch to the video compilation. You sure this'll work?" "Mike," he said, smirking. "I once hacked a senator's campaign server with a Fitbit. I got this." I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything in my head. The courtrooms, the humiliation, Rachel's tears, my kids' confused faces. I wasn't nervous about exposure. I was terrified of how much I wanted it. The night of the gala, I put on my only tux, borrowed from Mason, and walked into the ballroom under a different name. The chandeliers sparkled, champagne flowed, and every guest looked like they practiced empathy for sport. At the center of it all, Rachel shone, flawless in silver, microphone in hand, voice trembling as she said, "This award isn't about me. It's about every woman who's ever survived." I gripped the remote in my pocket, waiting for Nina's nod from across the room. This, I thought, is how the truth returns. But not with rage, not with shouting, with proof. Because I'd learned something in all the wreckage. Revenge isn't loud. It's patient. It's clean. It waits until the liar believes they've won. Then it whispers, "Checkmate." The night was only beginning, but I could already feel it, the tide turning quietly, inevitably, like justice in a tuxedo. And when it hit, I'd be ready. The night of the gala smelled like money and moral superiority, two things Rachel collected like stamps. The Women of Resilience event was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, a place so pretentious it probably charged the chandelier's rent. Everyone there glistened. Sequins, champagne, camera flashes, fake smiles polished brighter than the marble floors. And right in the middle of it all stood my ex-wife, haloed by flashbulbs and hypocrisy, ready to accept an award for courage under fire. I walked in unnoticed, thanks to my new alias, Michael Rowe, a last-minute philanthropic donor. Nina Patel had pulled strings to get me on the guest list, and Alex Monroe, my hacker-turned-hacker with a tux, had handled the technical infiltration. I wasn't there to drink. I wasn't even there to confront her. I was there to end the movie she'd been starring in for years. Rachel looked like a silver dagger that night, sharp, beautiful, and dangerous. Her hair was swept back, her smile effortless. Every reporter hovered near her table like moths around a morally bankrupt flame. "You've been through so much," one journalist gushed. Rachel tilted her head, practiced sympathy gleaming in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "but pain builds character." I almost choked on my water. Pain built her character the same way Photoshop builds abs. Mason was somewhere backstage, disguised as legal counsel for the event, because apparently we were now living in a spy movie. Nina, dressed like she owned the place, sat near the front, subtly signaling to Alex in the tech booth. Everything was ready. All I had to do was press one button, the remote in my pocket, and the truth would flood every screen in that ballroom. Rachel took the stage, applause echoing like thunder. She began her speech. When I was at my lowest, when I was misunderstood and vilified, I never gave up. I stood tall for my children, for women everywhere who faced injustice. Oh, the irony. She was preaching resilience using a story she stole from me. Every sentence was a lie wrapped in designer sincerity. The crowd clapped at all the right places, like they'd rehearsed empathy. Then Nina gave the signal, a small nod, barely noticeable. My thumb pressed the button. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lights dimmed, and the massive screens behind Rachel flickered. Her PowerPoint of staged tears vanished, replaced by a black background and a single line of text. The truth matters. Gasps rippled through the audience. Rachel froze. Harper, sitting near the front, stood up, her face draining of color. Then the first clip played. It was a recording, Rachel's voice, calm and smug. Once this verdict lands, we're done. He'll be bankrupt, and I'll be untouchable. Her face dropped. She turned toward the booth, hissing something into her mic too late. The next clip rolled. Text messages between her and Daniel Reese. Move the funds before Mason notices. Keep Mike distracted. I'll handle Harper. The audience murmured. Phones came out. Recording started. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is this real?" Then came the video, the piece de resistance. Rachel laughing over champagne, bragging to her sister. They all bought it. The crying thing always works. Even the judge. Silence. Pure, perfect silence. Rachel's image filled the screens one last time, smiling wickedly, saying, "After this, I'll finally be free." The screen faded to black. The room erupted, not applause this time, but chaos. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. The audience didn't know whether to leave, cry, or order more champagne. Security scrambled. The host rushed to the mic, stammering, We seem to be experiencing technical." Rachel grabbed the microphone, her composure fracturing. "This is slander. Lies. He did this," she shouted, pointing directly at me. Every head turned. For the first time in months, I didn't look away. I stood up slowly, calm as gravity. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the microphones to catch, "those are your words, Rachel. You made your own documentary." The ballroom went nuclear. Harper tried to drag Rachel off stage, but Rachel shoved her away. "He hacked me. He's dangerous," she screamed. Mason stepped forward, badge out. "Ma'am, you might want to stop talking. The district attorney's office is already on their way." Rachel froze mid-scream. You could see the exact moment realization hit, that the cameras, the public, the whole glittering empire she built out of lies were turning on her. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Wasn't she the fake bruise lady?" Another whispered, "Guess resilience comes with receipts." I didn't stay for the end. I walked out through the side door, the noise fading behind me. Nina caught up, grinning like a cat that just closed a deal. "Flawless execution," she said. Alex joined us, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Told you it'd work." Mason's voice came through my earpiece. DA confirmed. "Investigators are en route to her house tonight. They have everything. Everything. The recordings, the fake charities, the bank transfers." Outside, the night air hit me like clarity. For the first time in forever, breathing didn't feel like a chore. I could finally exist without defending my name every 5 minutes. Reporters spilled out behind me, yelling questions. "Mr. Rowan, was that your doing? Do you plan to press charges? Is it true she embezzled company funds?" I stopped, looked at them, and smiled. A real one this time. "No comment," I said. "But maybe check tomorrow's headlines." I got into the waiting car. The city lights blurred past the window as Mason called again. "She's finished, Mike. Fraud, perjury, conspiracy. They'll bury her in paperwork before she even sees a jail cell." I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just whispered, "Good." Because that night wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. About taking back the truth she'd stolen and setting it free in front of the whole damn world. By morning, every news outlet had the footage. The same channels that once called me a monster now called me vindicated. Rachel's lawyer resigned publicly. The foundation revoked her award and issued a statement of deep regret. Her accounts were frozen. Her reputation, gone. And for once, silence worked in my favor. The next text I got was from an unknown number. It was short. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long minute, then deleted it. Some apologies arrived too late to matter. That night, I poured one last drink, raised it to no one in particular, and said softly, "To resilience, the real kind." Rachel wanted to build her legacy on my destruction. Instead, she built my redemption. And I didn't even have to raise my voice to make it happen. The courtroom felt different this time. Lighter, like the air had finally been scrubbed clean. The judge's gavel came down with words I'd been starving to hear. "Mr. Rowan, you are fully exonerated." That was it. No confetti, no music, just quiet justice. Rachel sat across the room, pale, cornered, the empire of lies crumbling around her. When it ended, I walked outside into sunlight that actually felt like it belonged to me again. Mason shook my hand. Alex and Nina grinned like proud conspirators, and somewhere deep inside, I finally unclenched. My kids ran up, Emma first, then Josh, laughing, shouting, "Daddy, it's over." I held them tight, breathing in something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Rachel lost her freedom. I regained my life. But scars don't fade, they just stop bleeding. As I drove home, I caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled. "Justice," I whispered, "looks good on me." When my wife and family learned about my lottery win, they planned a family trip at my expense. On the day, they abandoned me, my wife's sister's wheelchair-bound daughter, at the airport, saying, "You're in the way." Later, my wife called, screaming. I couldn't hold back my laughter, because my name's Gavin Cole, and if life were a movie, I'd be the guy who gets killed off in the first 15 minutes just to establish how dangerous the villain is. I'm 39 years old, work as a technician fixing everything from busted refrigerators to existential crises disguised as printer jams, and I've got a wife who thinks For Better or Worse was just a suggestion, not a binding contract. Melissa Cole, formerly Melissa Henderson, back when she still pretended to like me, is the kind of woman who believes she's achieved peak sophistication because she once bought a designer handbag on credit and hasn't shut up about it since. That bag cost more than my first car, and honestly, my first car had more personality and gave me less grief. Life at home had become as predictable as a rerun of a sitcom nobody asked for. Every morning started with Melissa's passive-aggressive commentary about my lack of ambition, which is rich coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment this year was getting verified on Instagram with exactly 200 followers. Half of them bots, the other half her own alternate accounts. Her sister Tracy would swing by at least 3 times a week to brag about her latest MLM scheme or her daughter's participation trophy collection, acting like she'd raised the next Olympic champion when really, her kid Ivy was just good at being a decent human being despite having Tracy as a mother. And then there was Linda, Melissa's mother, the woman who could suck the joy out of a puppy party. Linda had this special talent for showing up unannounced, critiquing my average energy, and eating all the good snacks I'd hidden in the back of the pantry. I'd mastered the ancient art of nodding along while mentally constructing elaborate taco recipes in my head, because if I actually listened to half the nonsense that came out of their mouths, I'd have checked myself into a monastery by now. But then came the day that changed everything, or at least, it changed what I thought was going to be everything. It was a Tuesday, which is already the worst day of the week because at least Monday has the decency to be obviously terrible. I'd stopped at the corner gas station on my way home from a job, where I'd spent 4 hours explaining to a grown man that his laptop wouldn't turn on because he'd never plugged it in. I grabbed my usual, a pack of gum, a questionable hot dog that had been rotating on those heated rollers since the Clinton administration, and a $10 lottery ticket. I'd been buying these tickets every week for about 5 years. Not because I actually thought I'd win, but because that tiny slip of paper represented $10 worth of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could escape the gravitational pull of my mundane existence. It was cheaper than therapy and had roughly the same success rate. I scratched off that ticket while sitting in my truck in the driveway, procrastinating the inevitable moment I'd have to walk through my front door and pretend to care about whatever new crisis Melissa had manufactured. I wasn't paying much attention, honestly, just scraping away the silver coating while mentally calculating how many more years until retirement, when I noticed something weird. The numbers matched. Not just 1 or 2 numbers, all of them. I checked again, because surely this was some kind of cosmic prank. I pulled out my phone, Googled the lottery website, and nearly dropped my phone into my lap when I realized I'd hit the 3rd prize jackpot. I wasn't buy a yacht and retire to the Bahamas rich, but I was definitely pay off the mortgage and tell my boss where he can stick his performance reviews rich. For about 30 glorious seconds, I sat there imagining all the possibilities. I could finally fix up my workshop, maybe take that trip to Colorado I'd been dreaming about since before Melissa decided camping was beneath her aesthetic. I could breathe. But then reality crashed back in like an unwanted relative at Thanksgiving, because I absolutely knew, that the moment Melissa found out about this money, my life was about to become exponentially more complicated. And I was right. I was so tragically, hilariously right. I walked into the house trying to play it cool, but Melissa has this sixth sense for when something good happens to me that she can potentially ruin. She was in the kitchen, photographing her sad desk salad for her Instagram story with the caption, Wellness Journey Day 847. Even though I'd watched her demolish an entire sleeve of Oreos the night before. The moment she saw my face, her eyes narrowed. What happened? You look weird. Did you get fired? Please tell me you didn't get fired, Gavin, because I just ordered new throw pillows. I didn't get fired, I said, and before I could stop myself, because apparently my mouth has a death wish, I added, I won the lottery. The transformation was instantaneous. Her pupils literally dilated like a cartoon character who just spotted a pile of gold. The salad was abandoned. Her phone was forgotten. She practically teleported across the kitchen island. You what? How much? Show me. Show me right now, Gavin. Her voice had gone up about 3 octaves, hitting frequencies only dogs and desperate housewives could hear. I pulled out the ticket and the confirmation email I'd already received. Third prize. It's not retirement money, but it's, oh my God, we're rich, she squealed, and I didn't have the heart. Or maybe I just didn't have the energy to correct her definition of rich. She was already texting someone, her fingers flying across the screen with the kind of speed she never demonstrated when I asked her to help with literally anything. We should celebrate as a family, she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness I recognized as the auditory equivalent of arsenic in honey. Translation: we should spend your money while you carry the bags and smile for the photos she'll post to prove to her high school friends that she didn't marry a complete loser. I watched her spiral into planning mode, already talking about dinner reservations and calling her mother, and I felt this weird calm settle over me. Because here's the thing about being married to someone who only sees you as a supporting character in her own story. You get really good at seeing the plot twists coming. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. The family would circle like vultures who'd just spotted a wounded gazelle wearing a money belt. They'd all want a piece of my unexpected windfall, would frame it as family helping family, and would somehow make me feel guilty for even thinking about keeping my own money. But standing there in my kitchen, watching my wife transform into a one-woman planning committee for an event I didn't agree to, I made myself a promise. This money was mine. I'd earned it through sheer dumb luck and 5 years of persistent stupidity, and whatever happened next, I wasn't going to be the doormat anymore. I was going to enjoy watching this play out, because if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that karma has a sense of humor darker than mine. And boy, was I about to learn just how funny karma could be. Within an hour of Melissa finding out about my lottery win, my living room had transformed into what I can only describe as a hostile takeover meeting orchestrated by people who thought contributing meant showing up and breathing heavily. The family council had assembled with the kind of speed usually reserved for first responders, except instead of saving lives, they were here to dissect mine. Melissa sat on the couch like she was chairing a board meeting at Goldman Sachs. Her mother Linda had claimed my favorite recliner, the Audacity, and her sister Tracy was perched on the arm of the love seat, scrolling through her phone while simultaneously participating in the conversation, which is a talent only truly narcissistic people possess. They looked like the United Nations of freeloaders. If the UN's primary mission was figuring out how to spend someone else's money while making it seem like a democratic process. I stood in the doorway of my own living room feeling like a defendant about to be sentenced, except I hadn't actually committed any crime unless winning money fair and square was now illegal in the state of wherever the hell I was living. Gavin, sit down, Linda commanded, gesturing to the ottoman like I was a dog who'd just been called to heel. She was already sipping wine, my wine, from the bottle I'd been saving for an occasion that actually mattered, out of one of our good glasses. The woman had the elegance of a buzzard in a blazer. We need to discuss this blessing as a family. Blessing, I repeated, sitting down because apparently standing in my own home was now considered aggressive. That's an interesting way to describe something I won with my own money. Our money, Melissa corrected, her smile so tight it could have cracked her freshly Botoxed forehead. We're married, remember? What's yours is ours. Funny how that principle never applies to your credit card bills, I muttered. But nobody heard me because Tracy had just let out this theatrical gasp like she'd discovered the cure for cancer on her Instagram feed. Oh my God, you guys, I just saw the cutest resort in Los Angeles. Tracy squealed, flipping her phone around to show us a picture of what looked like a hotel from a lifestyle magazine. You know, the kind where they airbrush out all the poor people and fire hazards. We could totally do a family trip. Somewhere luxurious, with a pool and room service, and maybe one of those spas where they put cucumbers on your eyes for $200. I blinked. I'm sorry, did you just say we? As in, we. Plural. As in, you're inviting yourself on a vacation funded by money you didn't win. Tracy looked at me like I'd just suggested we eat our young. Gavin, don't be selfish. Family vacations are important for bonding. You wouldn't want to deny Ivy an experience, would you? And there it was, the trump card. Bringing up Ivy, Tracy's 17-year-old daughter, was their way of making me feel like a monster if I didn't immediately empty my wallet. Ivy was the only decent person in this entire bloodline, a sharp-witted kid who'd been in a wheelchair since a car accident when she was 12, and who somehow maintained her humanity despite being raised by Tracy. Using her as emotional leverage was low even by their standards. Ivy would probably rather I save for her college fund than blow it on overpriced hotel bathrobes, I said. But Linda was already shaking her head, her jowls swaying with the conviction of someone who'd never been right about anything but refused to acknowledge it. Education is important, but so are memories, Linda said, as if she were dispensing wisdom from a mountaintop instead of my recliner. Besides, Gavin, when was the last time you did something nice for this family? Melissa works so hard on her brand. Tracy is raising a special needs child alone, and I've been dealing with my sciatica flaring up again. I wanted to point out that Melissa's brand consisted of posting filtered selfies and occasionally shilling diet tea that gave people diarrhea, that Tracy's ex-husband paid child support and alimony that could fund a small nation, and that Linda's sciatica mysteriously only acted up when there was heavy lifting to be done or sympathy to be milked. But I learned long ago that logic was a foreign language in this house. Let me get this straight, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. You want me, the guy who just won this money, to pay for a vacation to Los Angeles, for all of you, so we can bond as a family? A family that, up until an hour ago, barely acknowledged I existed unless something needed fixing or someone needed a ride. Melissa's smile could have cut glass. You're being negative again, honey. Don't ruin the vibe. We're trying to include you in something special. Include me. I repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were spoiled milk. In my own vacation. That I'm paying for. How generous. It's only fair we all benefit from this blessing, Linda chimed in, taking another sip of my wine. She was already halfway through the bottle, which probably cost more than she'd contributed to society this year. Money changes people, Gavin. We're just making sure you stay grounded. Tracy nodded enthusiastically, finally looking up from her phone. Exactly. Plus, think about the Instagram content. We could all post from the same location, really show family unity. My followers would eat that up. I cleared my throat, trying to inject some sanity into this asylum masquerading as a living room. Here's a wild idea. What if I, the person who actually won the money, decided what to do with it? Maybe I want to take a trip. Solo. Just me. Alone. With nobody asking me to carry their bags or take their photo in front of a fountain. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, Linda's judgment crashing down like a ton of bricks wrapped in passive-aggressive disappointment. That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say, Melissa said quietly, and I could tell she was gearing up for the guilt trip of a lifetime. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed. What have you sacrificed? I interrupted, and even I was surprised by the edge in my voice. Your job? Oh wait, you don't have one. Your time? You spend 6 hours a day online shopping and watching reality TV. Your dignity? Pretty sure that shipped out around the same time you started an OnlyFans for artistic expression that got 3 subscribers, 2 of which were bots. Melissa's face went red. Tracy gasped. Linda clutched her pearls, literal pearls, the fake ones from JCPenney that she claimed were family heirlooms. How dare you? Melissa started, but before this could escalate into World War III, I heard the distinctive sound of wheels on hardwood. Ivy rolled into the room in her wheelchair, and the temperature immediately dropped. The kid had this way of commanding a space without saying a word, probably because she'd spent years watching these three operate and had developed a finely tuned bullshit detector. What did I miss? She asked, parking herself next to me. Let me guess. They're trying to convince Uncle Gavin that paying for a vacation he doesn't want to go on is somehow his idea? Ivy, adults are talking, Tracy said sharply. Adults, Ivy repeated, looking around the room. Right. The adults who've been screaming about a free trip for the past hour. Very mature. Much adult. I couldn't help but grin. This kid was going to rule the world someday. Linda cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Let's take a vote. All in favor of a family vacation to Los Angeles, funded by Gavin's winnings, raise your hand. 3 hands shot up immediately. Mine stayed firmly in my lap. Motion passes, Melissa announced smugly. We'll start planning tomorrow. Gavin, you'll handle the bookings since you're so good at technical things. After they'd finally dispersed, Linda taking the rest of my wine bottle, Tracy already texting her friends about the trip, and Melissa retreating to the bedroom to start packing even though we hadn't set a date. Ivy rolled closer to me. Uncle Gavin, she whispered, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. They're going to use you like an ATM with legs. You know that, right? I looked at this 17-year-old kid, the only person in this entire circus who treated me like a human being, and I grinned. They can try, I said, keeping my voice low. But this ATM has withdrawal limits and a really petty sense of humor. Ivy smiled back, and in that moment, I knew I had at least one ally in whatever chaos was about to unfold. Somehow, in the twisted logic that governs my household, I went from selfish lottery winner who should be grateful we're letting him breathe to official family vacation coordinator and chief bag carrier in less than 24 hours. It's amazing how quickly the narrative shifts when there's work to be done. Suddenly, I wasn't just some guy with money. I was the responsible one, the detail-oriented one, the one who understands how booking things works because you do computer stuff, right? Never mind that I fix refrigerators and rewire electrical panels for a living. Not plan luxury vacations for people who think roughing it means a hotel without a bidet. The morning after the family council, and I'm using air quotes so aggressive they could puncture steel, Melissa cornered me in the kitchen before I'd even had my coffee. This woman had the tactical planning skills of a military general when it came to spending money that wasn't hers. She was already dressed in her boss babe outfit, which consisted of athleisure wear that cost more than my monthly car payment and had never seen the inside of a gym. Good morning, honey, she chirped, sliding a piece of paper across the counter like she was delivering a ransom note. I made a list of everything we'll need for the trip. I figured it would be easier if I organized my thoughts. I picked up the paper, and I swear to God, it was typed, formatted, and laminated. Who laminates a vacation demand list? Sociopaths, that's who. The title at the top read, Los Angeles Family Bonding Experience, Requirements and Expectations, in a font that screamed, I took a graphic design class once, and now I'm insufferable. Let me break down this masterpiece for you. Destination, Los Angeles, with a footnote that said preferably near Beverly Hills for optimal photo opportunities. Accommodation, the Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel, 5 stars minimum. She'd underlined this twice. Transportation, business class flights, obviously, because we deserve comfort. I wondered who the we was, considering I was the only one paying. Activities, shopping on Rodeo Drive, spa day, fine dining experiences, and a surprise element that she'd refused to elaborate on. Duration, 1 week. She'd initially written 10 days, but had graciously revised it. How thoughtful. I looked up from this document that might as well have been titled, How to Drain Gavin's Bank Account in 7 Days or Less, and found Melissa staring at me expectantly, like a kid waiting for a gold star after turning in homework they'd plagiarized. You do realize I'm not Elon Musk, right? I said, setting the paper down before I was tempted to use it for its most logical purpose, kindling. This list reads like you're expecting me to fund a royal tour. Should I also arrange for a motorcade and police escort? Melissa's smile didn't waver, which was somehow more terrifying than if she'd gotten angry. You're being negative again, Gavin. This is exactly the kind of energy that holds you back in life. Don't ruin the vibe. The vibe, I repeated flatly. I'm ruining the vibe by pointing out that business class tickets for 4 people to Los Angeles would cost more than my truck is worth. And that's before we even talk about this hotel, which I'm guessing you found on some website that uses stock photos and broken English. It's a legitimate 5-star hotel, she insisted, pulling out her phone to show me the website. Look, it says luxury right in the name. The Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel. You can't fake that. I leaned in to look at her screen, and immediately, every alarm bell in my technician brain started ringing. The website looked like it had been designed by someone who'd learned HTML from a YouTube video in 2003. The photos were weirdly pixelated. The testimonials section featured reviews from people named John Smith and Jane Doe. Real creative. And the contact information was just a Gmail address. No phone number, no physical address beyond Luxury Mountain Road, Los Angeles, California. Melissa, I said slowly, like I was explaining fire safety to a toddler. This website screams scam. Look at this photo. That's literally the stock image that comes with Microsoft Word. I've seen it 100 times. She snatched her phone back, defensive now. You're just jealous because I found a good deal. Not everything has to be suspicious, Gavin. Sometimes good things happen to people who think positively. Good things like identity theft and credit card fraud. I muttered, but she was already walking away, probably to tell her mother about how unsupportive I was being. I stood there in my kitchen, holding this ridiculous laminated list, wondering how I'd ended up in this parallel universe where I was the crazy one for questioning a hotel website that looked like it was hosted on a GeoCities server someone forgot to shut down. But orders were orders, apparently, and if I wanted any peace in this house, a futile dream, but a man can hope, I needed to at least pretend to go along with this disaster in the making. Later that afternoon, while I was in my workshop trying to find my sanity somewhere between the socket wrenches and the existential dread, Ivy rolled in. The kid had this uncanny ability to show up exactly when I needed a reality check, or at least someone who wouldn't gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. Uncle Gavin, she said, maneuvering around my toolbox. Can I see that hotel website my mom and Melissa keep talking about? I pulled it up on my phone and handed it to her. Ivy scrolled through it for maybe 30 seconds before she started laughing. Not the polite kind of laugh, but the deep, genuine kind that comes from witnessing something truly absurd. Oh my God, she gasped between giggles. Uncle, this is so fake. Look at this. Their 5-star rating is written in Comic Sans. Comic Sans. What kind of luxury hotel uses Comic Sans? The kind that doesn't exist, I said, feeling validated in a way that probably wasn't healthy but felt great anyway. Ivy zoomed in on one of the photos. This picture of the Grand Lobby is literally from a real estate listing in Cleveland. I reverse image searched it. Cleveland, Uncle Gavin. This hotel is claiming a Cleveland office building lobby is their 5-star entrance. You're a better detective than anyone in this family deserves, I told her, meaning every word. She handed my phone back, her expression turning serious. Are you actually going to book this place? Because if you do, and it turns out to be some abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to feel bad for not warning you harder. You're warning me plenty, I assured her. But here's the thing, Ivy, I tried to tell them. I pointed out every red flag short of hiring a mariachi band to sing, "This is a scam," in 4-part harmony. They don't want to listen. They want what they want, and they want it on my dime. Ivy studied me for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. This kid was sharp, sharper than her mother would ever be, even if she got a brain transplant from Stephen Hawking. So what are you going to do? I smiled, and it probably wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that comes from spending years as a doormat and finally realizing you could just stand up. I'm going to do exactly what they asked. I'm going to book their dream vacation to Los Angeles, using the exact hotel they insisted on, through the exact website they found. And when it all goes sideways, which it will, spectacularly, I'm going to be very far away from the explosion. That's delightfully petty, Ivy said, grinning. But what about you? Are you really going to go on this trip with them? Kid, I said, leaning back against my workbench. I learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to win is to let people have exactly what they think they want. If they want the Grand Mirage luxury hotel so badly, who am I to deny them? I'm just the guy with the credit card and apparently no say in how it gets used. Ivy nodded slowly. Just promise me one thing. When this inevitably becomes a dumpster fire, you'll tell me all about it. I want details. I want to know exactly how this plays out. Deal, I said, shaking her hand like we were co-conspirators in the world's pettiest heist. But fair warning, it's probably going to be messy. Uncle Gavin, she said, wheeling toward the door. With this family, messy is the only setting we have. Might as well enjoy the show. And as I watched her leave, I realized she was absolutely right. If I was going to be forced into this circus, I might as well make sure I had the best seat in the house when the tent inevitably caught fire. The morning of the trip arrived with all the grace of a dumpster fire at a fireworks factory. I'd been up since 5 a.m. because apparently when you're the designated Sherpa for a family of freeloaders, you don't get the luxury of sleeping in before a vacation you didn't want to take. Melissa had packed enough luggage for a small army planning to invade a fashionable country. Tracy had shown up with 3 suitcases for a week-long trip like she was relocating permanently. And Linda had brought what I can only describe as a steamer trunk that probably hadn't seen daylight since the Titanic was considered seaworthy. I stood in the driveway at 6 in the morning, loading bag after bag into my SUV while the 3 of them stood around sipping coffee and critiquing my Tetris skills. Be careful with that one, Gavin. It has my good shoes, Melissa warned, like I was juggling nitroglycerin instead of her overpriced footwear. Tracy was on her phone, naturally, probably live tweeting our departure to her 17 followers who definitely didn't care. Linda was providing color commentary about how her late husband, God rest his soul, though I suspect he died just to escape her, used to pack cars with real organization and efficiency. You know what would be really efficient? I grunted, shoving another suitcase into the back. If any of you had packed less than your entire closet for a 7-day trip. We need options, Gavin, Melissa said, like she was explaining quantum physics to a hamster. You never know what occasions will come up. What if we get invited somewhere fancy? What if the weather changes? What if my Instagram aesthetic requires a wardrobe pivot? I decided not to point out that the weather in Los Angeles in October was pretty consistently sunny and that her Instagram aesthetic was filtered within an inch of reality, because I was already sweating through my shirt and it wasn't even 7 a.m. yet. Ivy rolled down the driveway with a single backpack on her lap, looking at the luggage situation with the kind of bemused expression that suggested she was reconsidering her life choices. Uncle Gavin, do they know we're going for a week? Not moving into Buckingham Palace? She asked, parking her wheelchair next to me. Logic and your family have never been on speaking terms, I replied, finally slamming the trunk closed with the kind of force that comes from deep, cellular frustration. All right, everyone in. We need to leave now if we're going to make it through security before our flight boards. The drive to the airport was exactly as peaceful as you'd imagine transporting 3 narcissists and 1 teenager who was silently documenting everything for future therapy sessions would be. Melissa sat in the passenger seat, alternating between checking her makeup in the visor mirror and reading aloud from her phone about all the exclusive restaurants we'd be eating at, restaurants I was apparently expected to book and pay for, naturally. Tracy was in the back seat on a video call with someone, speaking in that loud, performative voice people use when they want everyone around them to know they're important. Linda was complaining about her seat position, the air conditioning, the radio station, and my driving, which was apparently too cautious despite the fact that I was going 5 miles over the speed limit. Ivy sat quietly next to her mother, headphones on, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror and making faces that perfectly captured the absurdity of our situation. The kid had the patience of a Buddhist monk, probably because she'd been dealing with this circus her entire life. We arrived at the airport with exactly 90 minutes before our flight, which should have been plenty of time, except I had to unload mount luggage by myself, while everyone else immediately migrated toward the terminal entrance like I was their personal porter service. I managed to get everything onto 2 carts, a genuine feat of engineering that deserved some kind of award, and wheeled them inside while Ivy navigated beside me. You okay, Uncle? She asked quietly as we made our way to the check-in counter. Define okay, I said, already feeling the stress headache forming behind my eyes. If okay means contemplating whether it's too late to fake my own death and start a new life in Montana, then yeah, I'm peachy. Check-in was a whole ordeal involving Melissa arguing with the agent about luggage weight limits like the laws of physics were negotiable, Tracy demanding an upgrade she hadn't paid for, and Linda insisting her trunk was a medical necessity, even though the only thing medically necessary about it was the chiropractor I'd need after lifting it. I stood there with my credit card out, watching my vacation fund evaporate in baggage fees, and wondered if this was what hell looked like. Fluorescent lighting, overpriced airport coffee, and family members who treated you like a walking ATM machine. Finally, we made it through security. Another adventure involving Linda setting off the metal detector 3 times because she refused to remove her costume jewelry, and arrived at our gate with about 40 minutes to spare. I was double-checking our boarding passes for the 15th time, making sure Ivy and I had our seats together, when Melissa suddenly stood up with Tracy and Linda. "We're going to get snacks," Melissa announced, already walking away. "Gavin, you stay here with Ivy and watch our carryouts. We'll be right back." Something in her voice made my internal alarm system start blaring, but I was too tired to interrogate it. "Sure, fine, whatever. Gate doesn't change, and boarding starts in 30 minutes. "We know," Tracy said, not even looking at me as she followed her sister. They disappeared into the crowd of travelers, and I settled into the uncomfortable airport chair, trying to find a position that didn't make my back scream in protest. Ivy was on her tablet, probably texting her friends about what a disaster this trip already was. Around us, families were chatting excitedly about their vacations, couples were holding hands, and normal people were existing in a world where their relatives didn't treat them like disposable income. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. "Uncle Gavin," Ivy said, looking up from her tablet, "they're boarding our section." I looked around. No sign of Melissa, Tracy, or Linda. The gate agent was calling zones, and people were lining up with their boarding passes ready. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine, the kind of feeling you get when you realize you've been had, but your brain is still trying to process the betrayal. I pulled out my phone and called Melissa. It rang 4 times before she picked up, and I could hear airport announcements in the background, but they sounded different from the ones at our gate. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level even though my blood pressure was approaching stroke territory. There was a pause, and then Melissa sighed. Actually sighed, like I was inconveniencing her by asking a simple question. "Gavin, listen. Tracy, Mom, and I talked, and we decided that, well, you and Ivy would just slow us down. You with your practical concerns and sensible budgeting, and Ivy with her needs. This is supposed to be a relaxing vacation, and we just think it would be better if we enjoyed it without the extra complications." I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "I'm sorry, what? You're ditching us? At the airport? After I drove you here, paid for everything, and loaded your ridiculous amount of luggage?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, and I could practically hear her eye roll through the phone. "You're an adult. You can drive yourself home. We'll send you pictures. Think of all the money you'll save not actually going on the trip. Money I already spent on your tickets." My voice was getting louder now, and people were starting to stare, but I was way past caring about making a scene. "Well, that's just the cost of family, isn't it?" Melissa said sweetly. "Anyway, our flight is boarding. Different airline, better seats. We upgraded ourselves using your credit card information. Hope you don't mind. So I have to go. Don't sulk too much, okay? It's not a good look on you." And then she hung up. She actually hung up on me. I stood there in the middle of the airport terminal, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what had just happened. Around me, life continued. People rushing to gates, kids crying, announcements crackling overhead, but I felt like I was in some kind of bubble where reality had taken a temporary vacation. "Uncle Gavin," Ivy's voice cut through my shock. "Did they seriously just ditch us?" I slowly turned to look at her, and the expression on her face was somewhere between horrified and impressed. "Yeah," I said, my voice coming out weirdly calm considering I was internally screaming. "Yeah, they did. Congratulations, kid. We've just been upgraded to unwanted baggage class. Population us." People were definitely staring now. A woman with a baby gave me a sympathetic look. A businessman pretended not to eavesdrop while clearly eavesdropping. The gate agent looked concerned, probably wondering if she needed to call security. I smiled. and it probably wasn't a sane smile, and said loudly enough for our growing audience to hear, "Don't worry, everyone. My wife just remembered she forgot her decency at home. Happens to the best of us. Carry on with your day." Ivy covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "Uncle, you're making a scene." "Good," I said, finally letting the anger and absurdity of the situation wash over me. If I'm going to be abandoned at an airport by my own wife, I'm at least going to get some material out of it. And that's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around expecting to see airport security ready to escort me out for disturbing the peace with my public meltdown. But instead I found myself face to face with someone I hadn't seen in about 15 years. Noah Grant stood there holding a coffee cup from one of those overpriced airport cafes where a latte costs more than a tank of gas, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and sporting the kind of smile that suggested he'd just witnessed the most entertaining thing he'd seen all week, which, considering my circumstances, was probably accurate. Gavin Cole," Noah said, his grin widening. "Holy hell, man, is that really you? I thought I recognized that voice from across the terminal. You always did have a gift for creative public speaking." It took my brain a second to catch up, probably because it was still processing the fact that my wife had abandoned me at an airport like I was a used newspaper someone left on a bench. But then recognition kicked in, and I found myself staring at my old college roommate, the guy I used to stay up until 3 a.m. with building robots for engineering competitions and debating whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. "It is, fight me." "Noah Grant," I said, and despite everything, I felt myself smiling. "Man, you look like you actually figured out how to adult. What are you doing here? And more importantly, did you hear that entire phone call?" "Only the highlights," Noah said, gesturing toward a quieter corner near the coffee shop. "Come on, let's grab a seat before you give the people a second act." Though honestly, that was pretty spectacular. Forgot her decency at home. I'm definitely stealing that line. I looked at Ivy, who shrugged and started rolling toward the coffee shop. "I could use some hot chocolate anyway," she said. "And Uncle Gavin could probably use something stronger, but it's 10 a.m. and we're in an airport, so coffee will have to do." We relocated to a small table area that smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams, so basically every airport coffee shop ever. And Noah pulled up a chair while I tried to figure out where to even start explaining the absolute dumpster fire that was my life. Ivy parked her wheelchair at the table and immediately claimed the good chair, which I appreciated because at least someone in my vicinity had their priorities straight. "So," Noah said, setting his coffee down and leaning forward with the kind of genuine interest people rarely show anymore. "From what I overheard, your wife just ditched you at the airport? After you paid for a vacation? That's either the worst luck I've ever heard or the best story, depending on your perspective." "Little bit of both," I admitted, signaling to the barista that I needed the largest coffee they had and possibly in 4 drip of caffeine directly into my veins. Long story short, I won some money on a lottery ticket. My wife and her family decided they deserved a vacation funded by said money, made me plan and pay for everything, and then ghosted me at the gate because apparently I'm too practical and Ivy here has needs that would ruin their luxury experience. Ivy raised her hand. "The need in question is my wheelchair, which is apparently a massive inconvenience to people who've never had to think about accessibility in their entire privileged lives." Noah's expression shifted from amused to genuinely angry, which was interesting because I'd forgotten he had a younger sister with cerebral palsy. The man understood ableism in a way most people didn't. That's not just messed up, that's like several levels of messed up stacked on top of each other, wearing a trench coat and pretending to be one normal-sized messed up situation. "That's poetry," I said, accepting my coffee from the barista and taking a sip that burned my tongue but felt necessary for survival. "You should write greeting cards. Sorry your family sucks. Here's a metaphor." Noah laughed, and it was the kind of genuine laugh that reminded me why we'd been such good friends back in college before life, careers, and geography had pulled us in different directions. He'd gone off to get his MBA and climbed the corporate ladder while I'd stayed local, married Melissa in what I now recognized as a decision made by someone with significantly impaired judgment, and settled into a life of comfortable mediocrity interrupted by occasional lottery wins and constant emotional manipulation. "What are you doing here anyway?" I asked, changing the subject because dwelling on my abandonment was just making me want to commit vandalism against the nearest vending machine. Last I heard through the grapevine, you were doing some big tech thing in Seattle. Still am, Noah confirmed, pulling out his phone to check something. Actually, I'm heading to LA right now for a business meeting. Big tech client, potential partnership deal, the whole corporate song and dance. My manager was supposed to come with me, but bailed last minute. Food poisoning from some sketchy sushi place. So now I'm flying solo and probably going to bomb this presentation because I'm more of a numbers guy than a people guy. Something clicked in my brain, the way it does when you're a technician and you suddenly see how all the broken pieces could fit together if you just approach the problem from a different angle. What kind of tech are we talking about? Smart home integration systems, Noah said. Basically making houses run themselves. Automated climate control, security, energy efficiency, all that jazz. Why? Because, I said, feeling the first spark of something that wasn't misery I'd felt all morning. I've been installing and fixing that exact kind of system for the past 5 years. I could probably explain your product better than most of your sales team because I actually know how the guts work and why half of them fail within the first year due to poor electrical planning. Noah's eyes lit up like I'd just told him he'd won his own lottery. Are you serious? Gavin, man, this might be the universe's weirdest way of working things out, but I could genuinely use someone who knows this stuff. The client wants technical details, real-world applications, the kind of stuff that comes from actually working with the systems instead of just reading marketing materials. Uncle Gavin is really good at explaining broken things. Ivy chimed in, sipping her hot chocolate. He's had to explain his marriage for years, so technical systems should be easy. I snorted coffee through my nose, which was painful but worth it. Kid, you're going to make me actually like you. Too late. You already do, she shot back with a grin. Noah was already pulling up flight information on his phone, his fingers moving with the kind of speed that comes from being perpetually connected to work. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking, and feel free to tell me if this is insane, but I'm booked on a flight to LAX in about 45 minutes. Business class because the company pays for it, and I'm not a masochist. What if you two came with me? Gavin, you could help with my presentation, and honestly, after what your wife just pulled, don't you deserve an actual vacation that doesn't involve being treated like a human ATM? I looked at Ivy. She looked at me. We had one of those wordless conversations that happen between people who've bonded over shared trauma and a mutual appreciation for karmic justice. Free vacation? Ivy said slowly, like she was testing the words. Where we'd actually be wanted and appreciated. Where Uncle Gavin gets treated like a person instead of a wallet with legs. Versus going home to our empty houses and spending the week thinking about how we got ditched at an airport. When you put it that way, I said, feeling a smile creep across my face that was probably slightly unhinged but felt amazing. It seems like a pretty obvious choice. Noah stood up, already heading toward the ticket counter with the kind of confidence that comes from having an expense account and zero patience for inefficiency. Give me 10 minutes. I'll get you guys on my flight. We'll figure out hotel stuff when we land. And you can tell me every embarrassing story about your wife that you've been bottling up for however many years of marriage. 13 years, I called after him. And buddy, we're going to need more than a flight to LA to cover all of it. While Noah worked his corporate magic at the ticket counter. Apparently having a platinum status card and a company account makes airline employees significantly more helpful. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then I did something that felt petty and perfect in equal measure. I texted Melissa a photo of my coffee cup with the airport logo visible in the background. Thanks for the free morning. Really dodged a bullet not having to spend a week with you. Enjoy your scam hotel. Ivy leaned over to see what I was typing. That's going to make her mad. Good, I said, hitting send with more satisfaction than any text message had ever given me. She ditched me at an airport. I'm allowed to be petty. It's in the rule book under Justifiable Responses to Emotional Abandonment. 10 minutes later, Noah came back waving 2 boarding passes like they were winning lottery tickets, which, considering my recent luck with actual lottery tickets, felt appropriate. You're all set. Business class, window and aisle with the middle seat empty for Ivy's comfort, and I told them about the wheelchair situation so they're already prepping for early boarding. I looked at those boarding passes, then at Noah's genuine smile, then at Ivy's excited expression, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Actual hope that maybe, just maybe, things were about to get interesting in a good way for once. Noah Grant, I said, standing up and shaking his hand. You just saved me from spending a week rage cleaning my garage and plotting elaborate revenge scenarios. I owe you big time. Just help me not screw up this presentation, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. And maybe let me live vicariously through whatever karmic justice is about to rain down on your soon-to-be ex-wife. Deal, I said, and meant it. As we headed toward our gate, the right gate this time, with people who actually wanted us there, I felt my phone buzz with incoming texts from Melissa. I didn't even look at them. Whatever she had to say could wait until I was sipping champagne in business class, living my best life without her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or planned. Sometimes it's just living well while the people who wronged you realize exactly what they threw away. And judging by the frantic buzzing of my phone, that realization was starting to hit. If someone had told me 24 hours ago that I'd be sitting in a business class seat at 35,000 feet, sipping complimentary champagne that actually tasted like something other than regret and poor life choices, I would have assumed they were having some kind of psychotic break. But there I was, living proof that sometimes the universe decides to stop kicking you in the teeth and instead hands you a glass of decent bubbly and a seat that reclines to an angle that doesn't make you question your will to live. Ivy was in the window seat next to me, completely absorbed in the fact that business class came with actual meals on real plates instead of the sad peanuts and broken dreams they serve in economy. She was working her way through some kind of fancy pasta situation that probably cost more than my usual grocery budget, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. Noah was across the aisle, laptop open, frantically preparing for his presentation with the kind of focused energy that reminded me why he'd been the one to graduate top of our engineering class, while I'd been perfectly content with my B+ average and significantly lower stress levels. Okay, real talk, Noah said, looking up from his screen with an expression that suggested he was reconsidering every decision that had led him to this moment. I'm about to walk into a meeting with executives from TechVantage Solutions, huge company, massive potential contract, and explain why our smart home system is better than the 17 other companies pitching to them this quarter. My manager usually handles the presentation side because I'm better at the back-end technical stuff, and now I'm realizing I have no idea how to make this sound impressive to people who don't actually understand how any of it works. I set down my champagne glass, my second one, because if you're going to have a mental breakdown about your wife abandoning you at an airport, you might as well do it with decent alcohol. What's the actual product? Give me the technical specs, not the marketing garbage. Noah launched into an explanation that involved a lot of buzzwords like integrated IoT ecosystem and machine learning algorithms and seamless user interface optimization. I let him talk for about 5 minutes, watching his corporate speak get more and more convoluted before I held up my hand. Dude, stop. You're explaining it like you're writing a press release for people who already know what you're talking about. Let me translate this into human language. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app because explaining things is basically my job and also my primary coping mechanism for dealing with life. Your system is basically a house manager that actually works, right? It learns what temperature people like when they usually come home, which lights they forget to turn off, and handles all of that automatically without requiring everyone in the family to have a PhD in computer science. Noah blinked. Yeah, actually, that's exactly what it is. But how do I make that sound impressive enough for a multi-million-dollar contract? You don't make it sound impressive, I said, getting into the zone the way I always did when someone brought me a technical problem that needed solving. You make it relatable. These executives aren't buying technology. They're buying solutions to problems they actually have. I guarantee every single person in that room has come home to a freezing house because their smart thermostat is too complicated, or has argued with their spouse about who left all the lights on, or has gotten locked out because their smart lock decided to have an existential crisis. Ivy looked up from her pasta. Uncle Gavin once fixed a smart home system where the thermostat was set to respond to voice commands, but the guy had a parrot that kept yelling, "Alexa, set temperature to 90, and the family couldn't figure out why their house felt like Satan's armpit. Noah started laughing so hard, he almost knocked over his laptop. That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of story that would make this relatable. Do you have more of those? Brother, I have years' worth of smart home disasters, I said, feeling more useful than I had in months. I've seen systems that locked families out of their own houses, thermostats that thought 40 degrees was a comfortable living temperature, and security cameras that kept sending emergency alerts every time a squirrel walked by. The problem with most of these systems isn't the technology. It's that they're designed by engineers who've never actually had to live with their own products. We spent the rest of the flight essentially rebuilding Noah's entire presentation. I told him stories about real installations I'd done, problems I'd fixed, and the common complaints I heard from customers who'd paid thousands of dollars for systems that made their lives more complicated instead of easier. Noah took notes like his life depended on it, occasionally stopping to say things like, "Oh my God, why didn't our marketing team think of this? And you're basically doing their job better than they are, and you don't even work for us." By the time we landed at LAX, Noah had a completely revamped presentation that focused less on technical specifications and more on actual human problems that his product solved. He'd replaced slides full of graphs and percentages with real-world scenarios I'd helped him write, like the family who could never agree on temperature settings until the system learned everyone's preferences and adjusted automatically, or the parents who stopped worrying about whether they'd locked the doors because the system sent them confirmation alerts without being intrusive about it. "Gavin," Noah said as we waited for Ivy's wheelchair to be brought up from cargo, a process that always took way longer than it should, because apparently airport efficiency is an oxymoron. "I know I said you'd just be helping me prep, but would you be willing to actually come to this meeting? Having someone who can speak to the real-world technical side, someone who's actually installed and fixed these systems, would be huge." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Will there be coffee? Because I'm running on champagne and Sprite right now, and while that's a great combination for life in general, I should probably add some caffeine before I start talking to people who matter." "The client is meeting us at their headquarters in downtown LA, and I promise they'll have good coffee," Noah assured me. These tech companies all think they're going to change the world through the power of expensive espresso machines. 2 hours later, after a car service ride that made me feel like someone important for once, and enough coffee to wake the dead, I found myself in a conference room that had better furniture than my entire house. The TechVantage Solutions team consisted of 5 executives who all had titles like Senior Vice President of Strategic Innovation, and looked like they'd never fixed anything with their own hands in their entire lives. They were the kind of people who said things like synergy without irony and probably had assistants to read their emails for them. Noah introduced me as his technical consultant and field specialist, which was a fancy way of saying the guy who actually knows how this stuff works in real life, and launched into the presentation. I watched him work through the slides we'd rebuilt together, and I had to admit, the man could sell. He had that corporate charisma thing down, the ability to make even mundane features sound revolutionary. But about 15 minutes in, one of the executives, a woman named Patricia something hyphenated who had the kind of severe haircut that screamed, "I will destroy you in contract negotiations," held up her hand. "This all sounds great in theory," she said, her tone suggesting she'd heard 1,000 pitches just like this and was thoroughly unimpressed with all of them. "But we've been burned before by companies promising seamless integration and easy installation, only to discover their systems require a specialized technician for every minor adjustment. What makes your product actually different?" Noah looked at me, and I realized this was my cue. I set down my coffee, which was indeed excellent. These tech companies knew their priorities and leaned forward. "Ma'am, I've been installing smart home systems for 5 years, and I can tell you exactly why most of them suck," I started, and I saw a couple of the executives sit up straighter. Apparently nobody had called their competitors' products terrible to their faces before, and they were intrigued. Most systems are designed by people who understand code but don't understand houses. They don't account for old wiring, weird floor plans, or the fact that the average homeowner has the technical expertise of a potato and just wants their lights to turn on when they flip a switch. I spent the next 20 minutes basically doing what I do best, explaining complicated technical concepts in a way that made sense to people who didn't speak engineer. I told them about the parrot incident, about the family whose smart lock had locked them out during a snowstorm, about the elderly couple who'd given up on their expensive system because it required them to use 7 different apps just to adjust their thermostat. For every problem I described, I explained how Noah's system had actually solved it in ways that other products hadn't, because I'd installed enough of them to know the difference. Patricia was nodding now, actually taking notes. The other executives had stopped checking their phones and were paying attention. Noah was trying not to grin like an idiot because he could sense this was going way better than he'd hoped. So what you're saying, Patricia said slowly, is that your system is essentially idiot-proof. I prefer human-proof, I corrected. Because the problem isn't that people are stupid. It's that they're busy and stressed and just want their house to work without requiring a manual thicker than a phone book. Your system does that. It actually does what it promises, which in this industry is apparently revolutionary. There was a long pause, and then Patricia smiled. Not the polite corporate smile, but an actual genuine smile that suggested I'd just said exactly what she needed to hear. Gentlemen, she said, looking at her fellow executives, I think we've found our partner. The contract negotiation took another hour, but it was basically a formality at that point. By the time we walked out of that building, Noah had a signed partnership deal that was apparently a huge win for his company, and I had the surreal experience of having contributed something meaningful to a business deal worth more money than I'd see in my entire lifetime. Dude, Noah said as we climbed back into the car service, you just saved my entire career. That presentation was going to be a disaster without you. How did you do that? Buddy, I've been explaining broken things my whole life, I said, pulling out my phone to check my messages. Mostly my marriage. Compared to that, explaining smart home systems is easy. My phone lit up with a new text from Melissa. Hope you're not sulking at home. We're having an amazing time. Smiling face with smiling eyes. I looked at the message, looked at Noah, and then pulled up my camera. Hey Noah, can you take a picture of me looking comfortable and successful? He grinned and grabbed my phone. I held up my champagne glass from earlier, which I'd saved specifically for this purpose because I'm petty like that, and gave the camera my best, living my best life smile. Noah snapped the photo, and I sent it to Melissa with the caption, sulking respectfully from business class. Hope your scam hotel is everything you dreamed. Clinking glasses. Her response came in about 30 seconds. What? I put my phone on silent and settled back into the comfortable leather seat. Sometimes revenge isn't about elaborate plans or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's just about living well and letting karma handle the rest. And based on the 3 dots appearing and disappearing in my text thread, karma was about to get very, very busy. After we left the TechVantage building, Noah was riding the kind of high that comes from closing a deal that probably just earned him a promotion and possibly a bonus big enough to buy a small yacht. The man was practically vibrating with excitement, making phone calls to his boss and various coworkers, using phrases like exceeded expectations and game-changing partnership, while I sat there feeling like I'd accidentally stumbled into someone else's success story and somehow gotten credit for it anyway. We need to celebrate, Noah announced after his 4th congratulatory phone call, turning to face me and Ivy in the back of the town car. This deal was huge, and you made it happen, Gavin. My company has a corporate account at this incredible hotel my dad used to take us to when I was a kid, the Grand Mirage. It's up in the hills, absolutely stunning views, the works. What do you say? My treat, obviously, since you just saved my professional reputation. I was mid-sip of the bottled water the car service had provided when those 2 words registered in my brain. The Grand Mirage. The exact same name as the sketchy website hotel Melissa had insisted I book. The hotel with the Comic Sans rating and stolen photos from Cleveland office buildings. The hotel that Ivy and I had laughed about because it was so obviously a scam that even a desperate door-to-door salesman wouldn't fall for it. I choked on my water. Actually choked, like a cartoon character who'd just realized the universe had a better sense of humor than any professional comedian. You okay there? Noah asked, looking concerned while the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror like he was calculating whether he'd need to perform the Heimlich. The Grand Mirage. I managed to get out between coughs. You said the Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel? Yeah, that's the one. Why, have you heard of it? Ivy started laughing. Not the polite kind of laughter you do when someone tells a mediocre joke at a funeral, but the deep, gasping, tears streaming down your face kind of laughter that comes from witnessing cosmic justice, so perfect it borders on divine intervention. Uncle Gavin, she wheezed, clutching her stomach. Please tell me this is the same hotel. Please tell me the universe is actually this poetic. Same name. I confirmed, feeling a grin spread across my face that probably made me look slightly unhinged. Noah, buddy, that's the exact hotel Melissa insisted I book from some sketchy website that looked like it was designed by someone who learned HTML from a GeoCities tutorial in 1997. The site she found had the same name, but was clearly a scam. Fake photos, no real contact information, the whole 9 yards of internet fraud. Noah's eyes widened. Wait, so your wife tried to book a fake version of a real hotel? That's actually impressive in how badly that could go wrong. Oh, it's going to go wrong, I said, pulling up the scam website on my phone to show him. This is what she found, and I'm willing to bet my lottery winnings, what's left of them, that she and her family are currently standing in front of some abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, screaming at each other about whose fault it is. Noah looked at the website, then at me, then started laughing so hard the driver actually pulled over to make sure we weren't having some kind of medical emergency. Dude, you have to come stay at the real one. You have to. The universe is literally handing you the most perfect revenge scenario in the history of failed marriages. How can you say no to karma served on a silver platter? With room service and Egyptian cotton sheets? I added. The thread count is probably higher than your wife's credit score, Noah confirmed. Ivy raised her hand like we were in class. I vote yes to the Karma Hotel. Plus, I really want to see what a real 5-star place looks like compared to the fake one Mom probably showed me 1,000 pictures of. The decision was made. We redirected the driver and started heading toward the hills outside Los Angeles, winding up roads that got progressively more scenic and expensive looking. The houses went from nice to ridiculous, the kind of places with gates and security cameras and probably helicopter pads on the roof. Everything was manicured and perfect, like we'd driven into a movie set where nothing bad was allowed to happen except in Act 2 for plot purposes. So let me get this straight, I said as we climbed higher, passing a view of downtown LA that looked like a postcard. The real Grand Mirage is this fancy place your family used to visit, and my wife found a scam site using the same name to trick people into thinking they're booking the legitimate hotel. Probably, Noah confirmed. It's a common scam. They clone the name and some photos of real luxury hotels, set up a fake booking site, take people's money, and then send them to some random address that's either abandoned or doesn't match what was advertised. By the time people realize they've been scammed, the website's already shut down and the scammers have moved on. That's diabolical, Ivy said, but she was smiling. And Mom fell for it because she was too busy imagining her Instagram posts to actually verify anything. In her defense, I said, feeling generous for about half a second, she was very focused on spending my money as quickly as possible. Due diligence takes time, and time doesn't get you likes on social media. The town car finally turned onto a private road marked with a discreet sign that just said Grand Mirage in elegant script. No luxury hotel and Comic Sans, no pixelated photos, just understated class that screamed, if you have to ask about prices, you can't afford it. We drove up a winding driveway lined with perfectly maintained landscaping that probably required a full-time staff of gardeners with degrees in horticulture, and then the hotel came into view. It was absolutely nothing like the photos on the scam website. This place was real, solid, majestic in a way that made you understand why people used words like breathtaking without being ironic. The building looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that luxury wasn't about being flashy. It was about being perfect in ways that made you feel inadequate about your entire life. There were actual fountains, actual valet parking, actual people in uniforms that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. You ever laugh so hard the universe joins in? I said as the valet opened my door, and I stepped out onto a circular driveway that was cleaner than my kitchen floor had ever been. The valet, a young guy who was definitely questioning the sanity of the disheveled middle-aged man who'd just emerged from the car, talking to himself, nodded politely. Frequently, sir. Welcome to the Grand Mirage. Noah was already heading toward the entrance, calling back, Come on, Gavin, let me show you what a real hotel looks like. Ivy rolled beside me, her wheelchair gliding smoothly over the immaculate pavement, and whispered, Uncle Gavin, this is karma served with free Wi-Fi, and probably one of those fancy shower heads that makes you rethink your entire home renovation priorities. Kid, I think karma is serving a full 7-course meal with wine pairings, I replied, following Noah into a lobby that looked like it had been decorated by someone whose day job was designing palaces for royalty. The interior made me want to apologize for my existence. Everything was marble and gold accents and lighting that somehow made everyone look better than they actually were, which was a neat trick I needed to figure out for my bathroom. There were fresh flowers everywhere, the kind that were probably replaced daily because God forbid a petal looked slightly wilted. The air smelled like expensive candles and the dreams of people who'd never shopped at Walmart. A concierge approached us immediately, smiling like we were the most important guests she'd seen all day, even though I was wearing jeans and a polo shirt that had a small coffee stain I tried to hide by tucking it into my belt. "Mr. Grant, wonderful to see you again. We have your suite ready, and I understand you'll need an additional room?" "2 rooms, actually," Noah said, gesturing to me and Ivy. "And make sure one is fully accessible. My friend's niece needs wheelchair accommodations." "Of course, sir. We have several accessible suites available. May I suggest the Mountain View suite? It has a roll-in shower, wider doorways, and a balcony with what I'm told is a rather spectacular sunset view." Ivy looked at me with an expression that suggested she might actually cry from happiness. The kid had probably spent her entire life dealing with places that claimed to be wheelchair accessible, but actually meant, "We have a ramp somewhere in the back by the dumpsters, and good luck with everything else." "That sounds perfect," I said, then remembered I was supposed to be a responsible adult. "But Noah, man, I can't let you pay for all this. You've already done enough. Gavin, you just helped me close a deal that's going to make my company about $15 million over the next 3 years, Noah interrupted, signing something the concierge handed him. "My boss literally called me a hero. Let me buy you a hotel room. Consider it an investment in our renewed friendship and also payment for putting up with what I'm assuming is about to be the most entertaining series of texts from your wife in the history of marital communication breakdowns." As if on cue, my phone started buzzing. Not just one text, but that rapid-fire buzzing that indicates someone is having a complete meltdown and has decided to document it via message. I pulled out my phone and saw 17 messages from Melissa, each one more frantic than the last. The most recent one just said, "Gavin, call me right now, this isn't funny." I looked at Noah, then at Ivy, then at the beautiful lobby of the real Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Genuine, uncomplicated joy. "I think I'm going to let those marinate for a bit," I said, putting my phone on silent and following the concierge toward the elevators. "Maybe check them after a hot shower and whatever room service this place offers." "The Colorado lamb is excellent," the concierge offered helpfully. "Perfect," I said. "I'll take that, and also whatever's most expensive, because apparently I'm celebrating my wife's poor life choices and excellent timing." As we rode the elevator up to our rooms, Ivy leaned over and whispered, "This is the best day ever, and I didn't even have to do anything except get abandoned at an airport." "Welcome to the club, kid," I said. "Population, people who are about to have a significantly better vacation than they planned." After we got settled into our respective rooms. And I used the term rooms loosely because my suite was approximately the size of my entire first floor at home and had a bathroom that could have housed a small family comfortably. I took what might have been the best shower of my entire adult life. The water pressure was powerful enough to strip paint. The temperature controls actually worked without requiring a degree in mechanical engineering, and there were about 7 different types of soap that all smelled like money and good decisions. I emerged feeling like a new man, or at least like a man who'd temporarily forgotten that his wife had abandoned him at an airport that morning. I threw on the complimentary bathrobe that was softer than anything I'd ever owned, ordered room service with the kind of reckless abandon that comes from knowing you're not paying for it, and settled onto the balcony to watch the sun start its descent over Los Angeles. The view was insane. You could see downtown, the ocean, and probably 3 different social classes from up here. It was the kind of view that made you understand why people went into debt for Instagram photos. Room service arrived about 20 minutes later, delivered by a guy who somehow made pushing a cart look dignified. He set up my food on the balcony table like he was preparing a state dinner, complete with actual silverware and a linen napkin that was probably worth more than my work uniform. I'd ordered a steak that cost $47. Which felt obscene until I tasted it and realized that cows could apparently taste different when they'd lived better lives than me. and a side of truffle fries that were so good they made me question every French fry I'd ever eaten before this moment. I was about halfway through my steak, dipping my fries in some kind of aioli that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce, when my phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a photo from our wedding where we both looked young and optimistic and deeply ignorant about what the next 13 years would bring. I let it ring twice more while I chewed thoughtfully on a truffle fry, considering my options. I could ignore it completely and enjoy my meal in peace. I could answer and immediately hang up. Or I could answer and see just how badly her day had gone, which based on her increasingly frantic texts, was probably somewhere between mild inconvenience and complete disaster requiring federal intervention. The petty part of my brain, which had gotten significantly louder since this morning, voted for option 3. I answered the call and put it on speaker because if I was going to witness a meltdown, I might as well have ambience. "Hello," I said pleasantly, like I was answering a call from a telemarketer I was about to politely decline. "How dare you trick us?" Melissa's voice exploded through my phone speaker so loudly that a bird on a nearby tree literally flew away in alarm. "This place is a dump. An actual dump. There's graffiti on the walls and broken windows, and I think I saw a raccoon." I nearly choked on my fry, which would have been a tragedy because these fries were too good to die during. I took a sip of the wine I'd also ordered, a Cabernet that the room service guy had recommended, and that tasted like liquid sophistication, and tried to keep my voice steady. "What dump?" I asked innocently, looking out at my spectacular view of the sunset painting the Los Angeles skyline in shades of gold and pink. "The hotel," she shrieked, and I could hear Tracy and Linda arguing in the background about whose fault this was. "The Grand Mirage. It's an abandoned building. There's no staff, no electricity. The address led us to the middle of nowhere up some sketchy mountain road, and we're stranded. You booked us a scam hotel." "Oh," I said, taking another deliberate bite of my steak. "You mean the hotel from that website you insisted I use? The one with the Comic Sans rating and the stolen photos? That hotel." There was a pause that lasted about 3 seconds too long, which told me she was rapidly calculating whether she could somehow make this my fault despite all available evidence pointing to her own stupidity. "You knew it was a scam," she finally shouted, her voice reaching frequencies that probably violated noise ordinances. "You knew and you booked it anyway to punish us." "Melissa, sweetheart, light of my increasingly dark life," I said, setting down my fork so I could give this conversation my full attention. "You found that website. You showed it to me. You insisted it was legitimate despite me pointing out approximately 17 red flags. You voted, democratically, as I recall, that we would use that exact hotel. I was just following orders from the family council. How is this my fault?" Noah appeared on the balcony next door, having clearly heard the shouting through the wall. He was grinning and holding his own glass of wine, gesturing that he wanted to listen in. I waved him over to my balcony and cranked up the speaker volume, because this was quickly becoming the best entertainment I'd had in years. "Fix this," Melissa demanded, her voice now joined by Tracy's indignant squawking and Linda's wine-soaked commentary about family loyalty. "Fix this right now, Gavin. We're stuck here with all our luggage and nowhere to stay, and it's getting dark." I said thoughtfully, watching Noah mouth, "This is amazing," while trying not to laugh. That does sound like a problem. A problem that I'm currently unable to help with because, and this is important, I'm not there. Because you ditched me. At the airport. This morning. Remember? "This isn't about that," she yelled, which was exactly what someone would say when they realized that it was, in fact, entirely about that. "It's absolutely about that," I corrected, popping another truffle fry into my mouth. "You made a series of choices today, Melissa. You chose to ditch your husband at an airport. You chose to take a trip using his money without him. You chose to use a sketchy website despite warnings. These are what we call consequences, and they're currently coming home to roost on your abandoned mountain road." Ivy rolled onto her balcony, attracted by the commotion, and I gestured for her to come over too. She parked next to Noah, her eyes wide with delight as she realized what was happening. "Put it on video," she whispered. "I want to see her face." I shook my head. Some pleasures were best experienced through audio only, where the imagination could really paint a picture. "Gavin, I swear to God, if you don't help us right now," Melissa started, but I cut her off. You'll what? Abandon me at an airport? Too late. Spend my money without my permission? Already did that. Treat me like a walking ATM while simultaneously resenting my existence? That's been the last 13 years in a nutshell. I paused for effect, swirling my wine like I was some kind of villain in a movie who'd finally gotten the upper hand. No, I don't think I'll be helping you out of this particular situation. Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of this incredible 5-star room service. Speaking of which, I held the phone away from my ear and called toward my suite door. Excuse me, could I get another order of those truffle fries? And maybe the lamb your colleague mentioned earlier? Yes, the expensive one. Perfect. Melissa was screaming something unintelligible now, a combination of curse words and threats, and what sounded like genuine panic. Linda had started crying in the background, the theatrical kind of crying she did when she wanted sympathy and attention. Tracy was on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to explain this disaster to her social media followers who thought she had her life together. You know what the best part is? I said, my voice calm and almost cheerful. I'm actually at the Grand Mirage right now. The real one. The legitimate luxury hotel that you were trying to book. It's spectacular, Melissa. The bathroom has heated floors. The towels are fluffier than clouds. The view makes me understand why people write poetry. And the truffle fries. Oh my God, the truffle fries might be the best thing I've ever put in my mouth, and that includes the wedding cake at our reception. The screaming stopped. There was dead silence on the other end of the line, broken only by what sounded like Linda having some kind of wine-induced emotional breakdown. You're lying, Melissa finally said, but her voice had lost its confidence. She sounded like someone who'd just realized they'd been outplayed and was desperately hoping for a loophole. Am I, though? I took my phone off speaker and switched to video call, then panned the camera around my balcony, making sure to capture the sunset, the city view, the remains of my $47 steak, and the bathrobe that had the hotel's logo embroidered on it. Does this look like I'm lying? I heard her gasp, followed by Tracy shrieking, "Is that the real hotel?" in the background. Sure is, I confirmed, switching back to audio only because her face had gone an interesting shade of purple that suggested her blood pressure was reaching medically concerning levels. Noah Grant, remember him from college? The successful one? We ran into each other at the airport, and he offered to bring me along on his business trip. Turned out to be pretty fortuitous, all things considered. This is your fault. Melissa screamed, and I could hear the desperation in her voice now. You set us up. You knew that website was fake, and you let us book it. I pointed out it was fake. I corrected. Multiple times. You called me negative and told me not to ruin the vibe. This is the vibe you created, babe. How's it feeling? Noah was literally crying with laughter now, trying to stay quiet, but failing miserably. Ivy had her phone out, probably recording audio for posterity or maybe for future blackmail purposes. Gavin, please, Melissa said, and her voice had shifted to the pleading tone she used when she wanted something and had run out of other options. We're stranded. We need help. Can you book us rooms somewhere? Anywhere. I thought about it for exactly half a second. No, you're just going to leave us here. You left me at an airport this morning, I reminded her. Turnabout is fair play. Also, I'm going to finish my dinner now because that lamb just arrived and it looks incredible. Good luck with your raccoon friend. I hear they're very intelligent animals. Maybe he can help you figure out your next move. Gavin. I hung up, just pressed the red button and ended the call with the kind of satisfaction that probably should have worried me, but instead felt absolutely perfect. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I silenced it and set it face down on the table. That, Noah said, raising his wine glass in a toast, was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. You're my hero. Uncle Gavin, Ivy added. I'm putting you in my will. That was art. I picked up my wine glass and clinked it against Noah's. To terrible wives, fake hotels, and the kind of karma that comes with truffle fries. An expensive lamb, Noah added, eyeing my new plate. Want to split it? I offered. I feel like this moment deserves to be shared. We spent the next hour eating overpriced hotel food, drinking wine that I couldn't pronounce, and watching my phone light up with increasingly desperate messages that I had absolutely no intention of answering. Somewhere down that mountain, my wife was having the worst day of her life, and I was having one of the best days of mine. Funny how that works out sometimes. 3 days in Los Angeles passed like a dream where everything actually goes right for once, which was disorienting because I'd spent the last 13 years in a nightmare where nothing ever did. Noah and I turned his business meeting success into an extended celebration involving more steakhouses than my cardiologist would approve of, a Dodgers game where we had box seats, and several profound conversations about life, marriage, and why we'd both been idiots in our 20s. Ivy got to experience what a real vacation looked like when people actually wanted you around, complete with accessible tours and zero-guilt trips about existing. But eventually, reality called. Specifically, my boss called asking when I'd be back, because apparently refrigerators don't fix themselves and Mrs. Henderson's ice maker was making concerning noises again, which probably meant she'd been hitting it with a shoe like last time. I caught a flight home, dropped Ivy off at her place. She hugged me goodbye and made me promise we'd do this again, minus the family abandonment part, and drove back to my house with the kind of dread usually reserved for dental appointments and jury duty. The house was empty. Blessed, beautiful, silent empty. No Melissa staging photos in the kitchen, no Linda criticizing my lawn maintenance, no Tracy bragging about her latest pyramid scheme disguised as entrepreneurship. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how much noise pollution you've been living with. I was pouring myself coffee and contemplating whether coming home had been a mistake when I noticed the landline answering machine blinking like a strobe light at a rave. 23 messages. 23. I hit play expecting Melissa's voice, but instead got something way better. This is Officer Martinez with the Los Angeles Police Department, calling for Gavin Cole regarding Melissa Cole, Linda Henderson, and Tracy Morrison. I'm not ashamed to admit I laughed so hard I snorted coffee through my nose, which hurt, but was absolutely worth it. Apparently, after getting stranded at their fake hotel, the three of them had tried to economize by shoplifting sandwiches from a convenience store. Security caught them. Things escalated. They'd rented a car using my credit card, which I immediately disputed. Thank you very much. And in their panic to escape some imaginary persecution, Tracy crashed it into a parked police cruiser. You literally cannot make this stuff up. Reality had become more ridiculous than anything I could have invented. The fallout was spectacular. Linda got arrested for disorderly conduct and lost her presidency at her precious social club. Apparently being a criminal doesn't play well with the wine and gossip crowd. Tracy got banned from her gym for bringing negative energy and legal drama into their wellness space, which was the most LA sentence I'd ever heard. And Melissa? Oh, sweet karma. Her influencer sponsorship with that sketchy diet tea company dropped her immediately, citing misalignment with brand values. Because apparently giving people diarrhea is fine, but petty theft crosses the line. I saved all the voicemails, poured another coffee, and smiled. Sometimes the universe doesn't just give you justice. It gives you a comedy show with perfect timing. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new apartment, a place that's entirely mine, decorated with furniture I actually like, and blissfully free of anyone telling me my energy is too average. The divorce papers came through faster than Melissa could say, but what about my half? Mostly because her lawyer took one look at the airport abandonment evidence, the credit card fraud, and the police reports, and basically told her to take whatever I offered and run. I offered her nothing. She ran anyway. Ivy lives in the complex now, just 2 floors down. Turns out Tracy's parenting was more neglect than guidance. So the moment Ivy turned 18, she moved out with money I helped her access from her dad's child support account that Tracy had been managing. The kid started a podcast called Will Life with Ivy, where she talks about disability rights, toxic family dynamics, and occasionally roasts her mother's MLM schemes. It's got 50,000 subscribers and actual sponsors. I help edit episodes and provide technical support, which is way more fulfilling than fixing refrigerators, though I still do that too because bills exist. Noah and I turned that LA business deal into a full partnership. His company hired me as a technical consultant, which means I get paid obscene amounts of money to tell engineers why their smart home systems suck and how to fix them. I work remotely most days, occasionally fly out for meetings, and have business cards that make me sound way more important than I actually am. Melissa calls sometimes from random numbers I don't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. Her messages start apologetic, turn manipulative, then eventually just sound tired. Linda apparently moved in with her after losing her house, Something about unpaid property taxes and wine expenses. Tracy's on her third MLM this year. The three of them are living together in some apartment complex, probably making each other miserable, which feels like justice served with a side of poetic irony. Every now and then, I pour myself a drink, raise a glass to freedom, and laugh. Because the best trip of my life was the one I didn't take with them. Turns out getting abandoned at an airport was the universe's way of saying, "You're free now, buddy. Don't waste it." I didn't.